for abatement hearings, and we've got the assessor's office here. Larry and
Larry
Scotty.
White.
Scotty Giddings.
Thank you, and I guess we'll just go right down in order on these,
Okay.
unless you have any last minute changes.
Just the one that I sent the email on.
Beer.
Yes.
Very last.
Arthur Beers.
And the two stits, they're Pensco Trust
Scotty just received an email
and NTC and Company.
just before we came over saying that she was not going to contest the recommendations. That would be Pensco Trust
Yes?
and NTC and Company.
Okay, so that means we only have 3 to do this morning.
Yeah, so I guess we should probably formally just say that our recommendation for those is denial and that she was not going to contest them. So we didn't get anything, a formal withdrawal. She said she wasn't going to be here and wasn't going to contest our recommendation. So I suppose we should just at least go through the formality of making a recommendation to uphold the assessor's recommendation for denial.
Okay, and
Those two.
okay, so,
But we can do those when we get to them, or,
well, let's do it right now. It's just,
okay?
Did we go into the special meeting yet?
yeah, we did. I just called the order.
Do we have to vote for it? Or?
No.
So I guess somebody would just need to make a,
So the question is, I guess we entertain a motion to accept the assessor's recommendation for the Pensco Trust Company.
Schedule number 3400.
I'll make that
And
motion. You do one at a time, or
we could do them both together, I think. And also the NTC and Company.
Schedule 3922.
I'll make a motion to uphold the assessor's recommendation on those 2 items.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And then do we need to do something on Arthur Beer as well?
I suppose if nothing else, we can just read into the record that we received an email from Mr. Beer formally withdrawing that abatement, and so that one has just been removed, from the list.
Okay.
All
Any
right.
questions?
Let the record reflect it.
All right, great. So,
Schedule number 3953.
Yes.
so
So the first one on the list is actually an approved abatement, and typically the only abatements that come before the board, approved abatements, are those where the refund is greater than $10,000. This is a property in West Buttermilk that filed an abatement back in 2008, 2009, and the basis of the appeal was the correct classification of the property, residential versus vacant land. The subject property is owned in common with the adjacent residential property under the same name, both owned by James and Betsy Fifield. We had originally recommended that the property be classified as vacant land. It went all the way through the BAA. They appealed the BAA's decision to the Court of Appeals, which remanded the decision back to the BAA, based on a nuance of the law pertaining to residentially classified vacant parcels. And really the gist of it is we have always maintained that adjacent parcels under common ownership, vacant parcel can have a residential classification if it is used as an extension of the house on the adjacent lot. A more typical situation is you've got, lot A and lot B, and lot B is, the fenced side yard, to lot A. This one is a little bit unique in that the properties were large. They are under common ownership. There is no dispute in that regard. But the point of contention in the original appeals was there were no, usually used in conjunction means, there's, like a mowed lawn, the sprinkler system, it's your vegetable gardens on the adjacent lot. And we didn't find any of those actual improvements. When it went to the Court of Appeals, they found that the presence of actual residential improvements was not the crux of the issue. It was actual residential use in conjunction, with the adjacent house. during the original BAA hearing, Ms. Fifield testified that she walked her dog and basically used the adjacent lot as their side yard, although there weren't any physical improvements. When it was remanded back to the BAA from the Court of Appeals, it became an issue of, okay, well, how are we going to prove or disprove that they are using this lot or not? I mean, I've been up to the lot, 3 times to do an inspection for the hearing, but as far as determining what their actual use of that lot was relative to the house, it was going to be very hard. There are portions of the lot that were, very heavily treed and would be difficult, to use. So the long and the short of it is we came to a negotiated settlement of 30% vacant and 70% residential, and the refund that is being awarded here or granted here is based on that revision of the classification. And there's a copy of the stipulation that was signed from the earlier 2008-2009 abatement, which prompted all of this, and we are using that stipulation from the 2008-2009 abatement as the basis for the adjustment for this, which is actually a 2010 abatement. So I don't know if that.
Okay.
So anyway, we're recommending that the stipulation that was approved for 2008-2009 be carried forward for 2010.
Okay. Questions, Rachel?
Well, it's not a question. I would make a motion for discussion's sake that I move that we uphold the assessor's recommendation of approval for the abatement on Schedule 20664.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Michael and Steve?
Larry, let me ask you, on this adjacent lot, does it have its own development grants there?
Yes, it is a separately platted, the Fifield subdivision is a 2-lot subdivision that is located kind of within Eagle Pines. So the Eagle Pines lots kind of run around, this is in West Buttermilk, the Eagle Pines lots kind of run around the perimeter, and this is the lot that is basically in the center of Eagle Pines. Originally one parcel, it was divided into 2. But the fact that it has rights or doesn't have rights, really is immaterial. What the court held is that, it's based on its classification, should be based on its actual use. And so that's where we came to the negotiated.
So this is a $32,000 per year dog walking area. That's what the court said.
That's correct.
Okay.
Steve?
A similar question about the new house, potential new house on the second lot. Would them receiving the abatement jeopardize their future development of the second lot as a residential?
No, the entitlements that were granted when the subdivision were approved, run with the land. It's my understanding. Is that correct, Greg? In other words, there's no expiration of.
The development rights I haven't.
Yeah, by virtue of the fact that it went through the subdivision process and actually became, a 2-lot subdivision, I don't believe that there's
Not affected by this.
that there would be any loss in the established rights for Lot 2.
Yeah. Rachel?
Yeah, just a question, because this is a fairly unique finding and first time type of thing presented to us from the appeals court. Do you feel it has implications for properties that might not be adjacent? I mean, is it just
No,
the properties are adjacent?
the way the law is written is properties have to be physically adjacent
Okay,
and under common ownership.
okay,
And so those 2 criteria in and of themselves eliminates most cases, just because usually people have, Lot 2 under a LLC, for whatever purposes. And so when they're, even though the same people behind the curtain, 2 technically different legal entities, and so in most cases, it's not an issue just because the ownership is in common.
okay.
But they have to be physically adjacent. It can't be
2 different lots, and I go and walk my dog.
correct. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Rob?
And just to be clear on something that Michael said, it's not a $32,000 dog walking area because that's the refund. That's not the valuation of the property.
That's correct.
The valuation of the property is far more than that.
Correct, it's still valued
It's
at
just
market
the tax
value.
rate is changing from fully vacant land to partially residential.
Correct, and
70% residential, which is a lower tax rate, so they're getting a refund on what would have been fully vacant land.
Correct.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Okay, the next one is Scotty is going to do, and this is the Gregory.
So, a lot up in Brush Creek Village, Mr. Gregory purchased the property in March of 2012, as stated for $862,500. There was, I think, an appraisal that you have, Lindy, that should be part of your packet for that. And he is requesting that the value be dropped to that amount. And I did run the comparables. The issue is that he's asking for the amount to be reduced to what he paid for, but the tax year that his bill is for is the previous year, which is for the previous appraisal period of 2008 to 2010. So that's where the value came from that we have on it. He also did not appeal the property value in May after he bought it in March. So he has since...
For the current year.
For the current year. So the appraisal will show that, or we've got comparables that I pulled from 2008 to 2010, which support the value that's on your 005 page of the presentation. And there is one sale in Brush Creek at Medicine Bow Road, which made with the adjustments for square footage and the effective year and the quality of construction, brings that up to $1,225,000. I did pull two other comps from Melton Ranch because there was only the one qualified sale in Brush Creek that I could use. The other one that he wanted to use was a foreclosure, or it was between related parties. So that's not a qualified valid sale. So the one that I used in Brush Creek supports the value, and the other two up in Melton Ranch also support the value because he's right in between the two of them, one at 1.4 and one at 1 million, and he's at 1.167. So I felt that that value should be held, and that was my recommendation to deny his abatement appeal.
okay, so again, we're looking at the period of July 2008 to June 2010.
That's correct.
The property was appraised as of January 2012. So just to maybe double check the numbers, would you ever look at that appraisal and then go back in terms of a timeline adjustments several years, knowing what you would have done you usually do time adjustments going forward, but do you ever look back just as a comparison?
No, statutorily, we're not able to consider any data, after that June 3rd. Well, there's always an exception to the rule. If something was under contract prior to June 30th of the valuation date for that particular year and didn't close until, let's say, July or August, but was under contract, say, in May, you can use that kind of a sale that occurred after the time period. But in this case, the sale itself was well after, the June 30th, 2010 valuation date, and the sales that were used in the appraisal were also well after that June 30th, 2010 valuation date. And so, unfortunately, none of that data can be considered because of the timing of those sales relative to the valuation date.
Okay, then did you explain that? to the party?
I did via email. He's in Australia.
Oh, okay.
A little tough to get in touch with him unless I
Yeah.
want to be here at 2 o'clock in the morning.
So you explained that, and did you get any response back from him and say he understood or he didn't understand?
He said that he still felt that the property should be worth what he purchased it
Yeah,
for.
okay. All right. Other questions? Rob and Steve?
I guess this kind of relates to George's question. I totally agree, but this is a common, for the record, this is a common misunderstanding of how the law works in terms
Very
of
much.
the valuation date and the comps that can be used to determine the valuation at that date.
Right.
But my question, just out of curiosity, I know we have charts that show for various areas of the county how, in general, the valuation changes. And this property was sold on March 3rd, 2012. So our appraisal on, or the tax asset valuation on June 30th, 2010. So there's a year and a half difference. Do we have those charts to show that there was a 20% decrease in valuations in that area?
No, we didn't, and again, primarily it's because the sale of the subject property is not one that is eligible to be
Yeah.
considered, anyway. As a matter of the next reappraisal cycle, his sale was used and was the basis for the current valuation cycle. So the current valuation cycle is June 30, 2012.
Yeah.
And when we did our time trend studies for this valuation cycle, of which his sale, was one of the data points, it did show that there was a continued downward
Okay,
trend.
that's what I'm asking. Yeah, there is.
Between 2010 and 2012, but we weren't able to reflect that continued downward trend until now.
Sure.
With the current
Yeah.
reappraisal.
And it's just, again, out of curiosity, I agree with the way that this has been
Yeah,
assessed.
yeah.
But it's because this shows about a 20% decrease in value from the $1,167,000 assessment valuation versus the sale of $862,000.
And my guess, and Scotty can correct me if I'm wrong, but my guess is that for Brush Creek Village in a general sense, that's probably, the ballpark that
Yeah.
values went down between the last valuation cycle and this valuation
Yeah.
cycle.
Thanks.
I think Steve was up. and
Sure.
Rachel.
Yeah, it looks like he probably got a good deal on the purchase price because it's lower amount per square foot than the comparable sales. But I just was thinking about the difference between Brush Creek Village and like Melton Ranch, but then the other comparable is on Medicine Bow, so it's in the same close neighborhood. But
He did get a pretty good deal.
yeah, so then looking at the next revaluation, would you put it more like at the 1.167
His
value,
was
or
used as a
you
sale
take
for
into
this-
account his lower purchase price when you do the reevaluation?
Since this was a sale for this next reevaluation, it was used as a comparable sale in
Mhm.
determining the values for all of the properties in Brush Creek.
Mhm.
For this time, not
Yeah, yeah.
And I think his error was just, he wanted to, take his current value and apply it retroactively, and, we just statutorily just aren't able to do that.
Rachel?
Yeah, just kind of a general comment. Because of the nature of the whole program and, looking backwards for value, individual property owner kind of may suffer if values decline during the 2-year time period after the valuation. On the other hand, we've seen markets that are accelerating rapidly in value, and for those 2-year period, those property owners are having a value or a benefit of not paying their appreciated value on the taxes. So, unfortunately, the sword cuts both ways, and this is just an example of it cutting backwards.
Yeah.
I would make a motion to uphold the assessor's recommendation for denial for the 2012 tax year of Schedule 3566 Peter Gregory Brush Creek Village subdivision.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the next parcel is scheduled 21438, and I'm not going to try to pronounce the name because I'll probably just butcher it.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, this is a conference call, so we'll have to try to get.
What, the dial a 911?
Yes.
Hello, this is Scotty with the County Assessor's Office and the County Commissioners of Pickens County. Is this Mr. Legnami?
Yes, it is.
Did I pronounce that correctly?
Close enough.
Close enough?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we are in the hearing for your abatement request for your property up on Ridge Run, the
Right.
duplex.
Right.
Okay, and this is Commissioner Newman, and the process we use on these is we'll hear a presentation from the assessor's office, we'll get questions from any of the other commissioners, and then we'll turn it over to you for your presentation, okay?
Okay.
Okay, this is a half a duplex, or a duplex, of which he bought half in 2012, January of 2012, and purchased it for $1,790,000. It's a brand new duplex, and the purchase was, again, after the time period of the sales for that period, so we had to again go back to 2008 to 2010 for sales in the time frame to use. There was one older half duplex sale in the subject neighborhood, and the petitioner and our office used that sale. In addition, the owner also used a sale in the Ridge condominium complex, which was deriving his requested value of $1.1 million. I also used a Meadow Ranch complex, which is just below the Ridge Run half duplex of the subject, in the very close proximity, so that's why I used that one. I also used one of the units in the Country Club townhomes, and by putting the comparable sales together, I had found that I could do a slight adjustment down from his purchase price of 1.7 down to 1.5, and I did offer that to the petitioner, and he has declined because he wants the value to be lower than that. If you look at, let's see. My apologies here, trying to get to the right. Just to go over the comparables, if you all had any questions on that.
I have several of questions.
Okay, we'll get you in a second, sir.
So based on the adjustments that I made for the heated living area and quality of construction and the age, etc., the subject property, which came in at 1.913, which was the value of it set for that time period. My comparables were, as I said, the North Ridge area, which is right next to it. That value was 1.338. And then the Meadow Ranch, which is the subdivision just below The North Ridge Lane area, that value came out to 1.7, and the Snowmass Club comparable that I used, the value was 1.8. So with a 1.3, 1.7, and 1.8, I felt like I could potentially give him the value of 1.5 because these comparables very well supported that, and actually could have been higher, but it could have actually supported the sale price that he used. But I did offer the 1.5, and again, that was not accepted.
Okay. Questions from the board? Rachel?
Scotty, do you know, is there a difference in services that the neighborhoods receive in terms of Snowmass Village bus service or proximity to the
Meadow
mountain?
Ranch units are right off of Owl Creek, so they've got the bus service that goes, the Two Creeks bus that goes to Two Creeks and up to the ski area in the base village. Ridge Run is not as accessible to those services. And the Country Club condos also has the same bus service. They've also got, you know, they're close to the golf course, and some of them are right on the golf course, which is a nicer location than the Ridge Run. But the Ridge Run, his subdivision is mostly all duplexes. The unit he has is brand new and well appointed, and it's a little quieter up there because they are sort of off the main drag, so to speak, but they don't have the bus service and that sort of thing.
Okay. Well, is there any accounting for those sort of amenity differences when you're doing the comparables?
That would be basically in the location. Location. There's a line for location right under the bolded value adjustment on that sheet. And I did make an adjustment for the Country Club townhomes because they were further away, and they actually being close to the golf course, I sort of gave them that adjustment,
Okay.
the negative adjustment.
Thank you.
So, and Scotty, when you use the comp, and I think the protester had used the same comp on North Ridge Lane, number 8, which is an older unit, quite a bit older, but that still came in after an adjustment at 1.338. Am I looking at this correctly?
Well, you've got the total adjustments, and what makes it lower for the value, the indicated value, is that you've got the age difference because the subject is newer, so you've got that negative adjustment, but you've got positive adjustments for the age and for the quality of the construction. So I did make those adjustments to bring them up to, bring it up to a newer age, such as the subject, and make it more comparable to the subject by giving it those positive adjustments because it is older and because the quality of construction is less.
Right, and even with those adjustments, that unit is still being appraised at higher than what is being asked for by the petitioner.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions at this point for Scotty? Seeing none, Mr. Lignami, or however you would pronounce your name, you've got the floor.
Oh, okay, thank you. I think I'm having some difficulty understanding it, but I'd like to give it a little bit of a go here.
Okay.
There are some inconsistencies here to begin with, because I think that the ones that are using as comps is one is listed on the sheet as 153 North Ridge Lane, which is incorrect. There is no 153. It's 135 North Ridge Lane Unit A. And I refer back to this comp because it's the most like my property. The appraiser's number 2 comparables are not fair comparisons to my half duplex. The 170 Meadow Ranch Road C2, the time adjusted sales price of 1448796, and the square footage is very, very close. The appraiser incorrectly notes on sheet 1 that the comp is 0.15 miles from the unit. It's actually 1.35 miles, 5 minutes via Faraway Road. And it's part of a 60-unit complex. It's a 4-bedroom unit, one more bedroom than my unit. It has air conditioning, mine does not. And this unit sold again in 2011 for $1,050,000. And the tax bill to 2012 is $3,784. My tax when I purchased the place was something around $2,500, somewhere in that area, and I was told that it would be somewhat increased on the next appraisal. But it has more than just increased. It has gone more than double. I don't have those actual figures in front of me, what they specifically were, but well, I do have it. Yeah, it's a 6,264 as opposed to 25 something. Anyway, there is quite a bit of difference. The other comp that was made here was the one in the Snowmass Club, Circle Club. The appraiser incorrectly notes on the sheet 1 that the comp is 0.6 miles from the unit. It is actually 3.37 miles, 10 minutes using Brush Creek Road, or 1.83 miles, 9 minutes using the Owl Creek Road. It's part of a 90 Snowmass Country Club private townhouses, which includes on-site management and staff, grounds care, snow and trash removal. The unit is located right on Snowmass Village Golf Course. The unit is walking distance to Snowmass Club. The Snowmass Village shuttle drives by every 20 minutes. So I think that some of these comparables are not really comparable. However, my comp, which was submitted at the correct address, which is 135 North Ridge Lane, Unit A, and the time adjusted sales price is $1,141,875. The square footage is 2,313, which is very close to the size of mine. It's a little bit larger. And the appraiser incorrectly lists the sales price of this comp as $1.205 million. On the sheet, the correct price is $1.250 million. This comp is in the same subdivision and is 0.19 miles from the subject, mine. And it has 3 bedrooms and 3.5 baths. It's the same as my subject. And it's offered as a comparison to present my case. My second comprehensive is at 229 Faraway Road number 20, and the time adjusted sales price is $1,112,535. The square footage is 2210, which is about what mine is. The unit is located 0.46 miles from the subject, 2 minutes via Faraway Road per MapQuest. And this was my comp. The comparisons, especially the one on the Snowmass Club, are completely unlike what my unit is and why I'm asking for this abatement. But in a sense of compromise here, I said that these are the appraisers' closest comp, which in my opinion would be appraisers' comp number 2, that 170 Meadow Ranch Road C2. Even though it's an additional bedroom and air conditioning, the price is $1,448,796. The 3 comps, 1.1 and 1.1 and 1.4 added together come out to 3.63 equals 1.2 value seems more reasonable. And I guess that's really what I have to say about it. It just seems that the areas around there and places that compare to mine are of a much lower price. I think she also, it was called here that some of the paperwork that I've gotten here, that the sale price of my unit was at 1.9, which is not. it's 1.79. I think that included a bunch of other charges, like, you know, the sales tax and transfer taxes and the like. But nevertheless, I mean, that is my explanation, my desire as far as what I feel that mine really should be worth.
So let me just understand, because it looked like you originally were asking for a valuation of 1.1, but I thought I just heard you say that you thought it should be at 1.3.
Well, no, what I did say, I've got it written down here, is that if we added them all together and divided and used it as an average, then 1.2 value seems more reasonable. That's what I did say.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought I heard you say 1.3. Okay, thank you.
Because of some of the considerations. Some other things that I pointed out here is that the house, well, it's almost new, but it wasn't new. It was occupied by the builder, actually, for a period of, I think, about a year. So I don't know if that has a dramatic effect on it, but it wasn't new, and I just want to correct the information so that we're clear on it, and, you know, we're in harmony, so to speak.
All right, thank
And
you.
that's about what I have come up with and what I'm saying in my own request for abatement, and hopefully that it will be considered based on the information I've just given you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Richards has a question.
Yes, and thank you for calling in and your explanations. The only point I really had to make is that when we look at the 170 Meadow Ranch Unit C2, the time-adjusted sales price that is used is then adjusted further in our assessment to have an indicated value to make them true comparable. So, for example, the quality of construction is considered very good, and your quality of construction is considered good, and so there's a $140,000 value taken off of that comparable. There's also some additions put onto that comparable for the garage and carport and things like that. So when we're looking at that adjusted value of the Meadow Ranch unit, it's actually $1,727,000, not the lower $1,448,000. And there is a similar adjustment on all the properties. So I don't know, Scotty, if you looked at the potential comparables that have been offered here by Mr. I'm sorry, I'm going to pronounce it Rudy, that how would they time adjust and adjust if they were going through this situation as well?
The one I used was the one in the same neighborhood that he used.
Okay. And so did he give any adjustment to the price or value, or he just used the flat value on that?
His comments on his abatement request, he says the two comparable sales I have found closest to my duplex are attached for $1,112,535 and $1,141,875. And in his description, then he goes into the stamped 012 page, goes into what his values are based on, it looks like square footage, and I don't see, it's got locations, and he's just given the sheet that we have on the website for what the square footage is, and then he's pulled, it looks like the off the pickanassessor.org, the property value summaries for each one of those, where he's using square footage off of those, which is coming from our website, so I've got the same square footage.
So essentially, just to get back to the one item that both of you used as comparables, the 135 North Ridge Lane, number A, had a time-adjusted sales price of $1,141,875, but the indicated value, when you make the other adjustments for a comparable, that value is $1,338,995. So I don't know, Mr. Laknami, if you went through the adjustment process on these pure prices. You know, so we're not looking just at the time-adjusted sales price. We have to take it from there forward to adjust it to comparable with your property.
Well, that is what I have gone by as a time-adjusted sales price, and one of them is 1.141875, and the other one is 1448796, and then found the third one, which I think is hardly a comparison, which is 2.574261. But that is an entirely different thing. It's 6 miles in another direction and part of a bunch of townhouses. It's not a half duplexes, which is what mine is.
I can agree with you that that may not be the best comparable, but again, when we go back to the other two, when we look at the value adjustment, we're looking at price values of those two properties of being the 135 North Ridge Lane at $1,338,995 and the 170 Meadow Ranch unit number C2 of being a value adjusted value of $1,727,436. So we're operating off of some different valuations of those properties than you are.
Okay, I think I see what you're talking about now. The indicated value is, I believe, was the number that you just gave me on that
Yes.
last, the comp 2. And what I've been going on here is the time-adjusted sales price, to use that as a basis, because that's kind of what was supplied there. So it's difficult to assess how these numbers have come up with. But what I've been going on is a time-adjusted sales price and using those comparisons in comparison to mine from a standpoint of how large they are and what those have been valued. And it's as simple as that. And I guess that's really all that I can say to substantiate my request for the abatement.
Yeah, there is a discrepancy, again, in terms of how you're looking at the adjusted values and how the assessor's office is looking at the assessed value based on their adjustment. So, Scotty, perhaps you can better explain that or reiterate what Commissioner Richards was getting at.
Well, what we would do is we take the time-adjusted sales price and we make adjustments for those comparable sales in the heated square footage, in the quality of construction, in the age and locations. So we don't just take the time-adjusted sales price and divide it by the square footage. We take that and we make our adjustments based on those different qualities or complements, or, as I said, the construction quality, that sort of thing. So we make additional adjustments to that time-adjusted sales price based on those. We just don't take that and divide it by the square footage. And I think one other comment I'd like to make, if you all would allow me, when he purchased the property, the tax amount on it was based on the unit in its percent completion as it was just being built. So he didn't have the full tax bill of the property as finished. He was only given the tax bill when it was at a percent complete. So unfortunately for him, he didn't have the information as to what it would be when it was completed.
Well, that is true. That is true, and it's very difficult for me to argue about construction of the comparative properties. Obviously, I have not gone into these places to look at them, and having purchased my piece of property, by appearances here, from what I'm seeing, having gone to the book, so to speak, after the fact, probably seriously overpaid, which is unfortunately my problem. But I see where you're coming up with the indicated value, which does incorporate what, one person's assessment of what the construction is like. So we have a disparity from the standpoint of how we're looking at these. And obviously I'm at a disadvantage because I'm not equipped with a lot of the knowledge and methods that you are, which is primarily why I'm asking for this. But as far as I'm concerned, from what I see, taking the comps that I have offered, I'm eliminating comp 3. I'm not even thinking about that because I don't think it's a comparison that's anywhere near fair. And with one comp that we're both using apparently with different addresses, but it's the same comp. And the second one, which is very, very close to what my property is like, plus even if we included that the Meadow Ranch unit, I mean, if I put those in there and add all three of them together, I still come up with an average of 1.2. And that value is the only thing I can say that I think is reasonable for me. And I don't know, I can't add anything else to it other than that I could use that would possibly sway your opinion. But this is what I see, and I guess the decision will be yours as to whether or not it's reasonable or not.
Scotty?
And I thank you for your time.
I'd like to make just one last point. Using comparables 1 and 2, and if you see the values of comparable number 1 in his neighborhood of 1.3 and comp number 2 in Meadow Ranch just below him of 1.7, that's where I came up with a 1.5 offer. And I just thought that that was the most reasonable because when you only have one sale in the neighborhood, you have to sort of broaden your search and go out and look at other properties, and which is why I went down to Country Club. Maybe I should have gone up to Ridge Road up higher, which would then have been units that had direct ski access, which his does not. One of the reasons I chose not to go up into the Base Village area in those condos up there.
And again,
that is reasonable. However, the other one, the Country Club thing is so distant from where I am. It's very distant, and a whole different circumstance than my property. I have half a duplex. These are townhouses sitting on a golf course in a major thing where you have got all kinds of services there that people, that is part of what brings the price up to what it does. And I see there that you've even, if I looked at that indicated value, I mean, your assessment of that property at 1.875 471 is much different from the time adjusted sales price, which was 2,574,261. It's quite a change.
Right. And again, I think we're looking at we're trying to compare apples to oranges. You're looking at the time adjusted sales price, and what the assessor's office is looking at is the indicated value after making all their adjustments.
Adjustments
That's exactly
down.
right.
Adjustments
That's exactly
downward.
right, because I mean that was what all my calculations were based on.
Correct.
And unfortunately, I don't know which one of these is correct.
Yes. Well, we're going to go with the assessor's methodology on this, and again, it seems like they've made some adjustments, and looking at these sales have averaged it out to come down in your evaluation from 1.9 to 1.5.
Right.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Steve?
No.
I was curious about the Ridge Unit 20 on 229 Faraway Road. And I don't know if that's a duplex or what it, is that the one, sir, that you were using as your comparable? At
Yeah.
229 Faraway Road, number 20?
229 Faraway Road, number 20, yes.
Okay.
The time adjusted sales price of 1.12, 535, which has a square footage of 2210, which is about exactly what mine is. And and it's 0.46 miles away from me.
Is that unit a duplex, or what is its,
I believe it's a duplex, but I'm not absolutely certain.
Condominium.
condominium? Okay. Also, comparing the bus service, I know a lot of people on Northridge Road who actually walk to the firehouse and get on the bus there. There's a short path that does go downhill, but it isn't that far from a lot of Northridge, and so I don't know where your unit
I'd
is.
back up that hill because I think it would be
Yeah.
very troublesome.
They were younger people
Impossible as far
going up on the uphill part there, but some people do use the bus service from there. I just wanted to point that out.
No, I was aware of that, and it had been pointed out to me at the time that I was getting the sales pitch to buy the property. But it is quite distant and somewhat different from a service standpoint.
Did I see someone else's hand up? No.
I was going to ask about that other comparable as well, and it seems that it's been clarified that that Faraway Road unit is a condominium, not a duplex or a single-family home. And there's always advantages to being in a duplex and not having quite as many neighbors sometimes. I did take this is Commissioner Richards, I did take the indicated value of Comp 1 and Comp 2 from the assessor's spreadsheet and added them together and divided by 2, and that would have been, if you were averaging those two together, would have been $1,522,000. And so I think the assessor's offer to lower this value to $1,500,000 was reasonable and fair.
So would you make a motion to that effect?
Well, what am I asking? What am I being asked now? That I should accept that or not accept that? Or I feel like I don't really have an argument. I think that my fate is in your hands. I mean, as to whether or not how you view these things, as to which way the comparable values are. I don't see it the same way as the assessor does, and that's why I'm here right now.
I appreciate that, and the process is we'll see whether we have a motion to approve or not, and then you will also then have a further avenue for a next appeal, if you like. But the assessor...
I'm not inclined to head in that direction, but I am hoping that there'll be something fair determined in this case and be done with it. But for me, it was a very, very big shock to go from $2,500 a year to $6,200. It's been a very big jump, which is what prompted this whole meeting to begin with.
Right, and again, as Scotty explained, part of that was due to the fact that you were first assessed taxes on not a fully completed unit.
I understand that, but however, certainly there were plans on the proposed property and what it would be like from a standpoint of square footage and even from the quality of what it would be built like, knowing the contractor. I think that he has a reputation, and I think it could have been a little clearer than what it is, or was, I should say.
You're probably correct in that.
Well, I just feel disadvantaged because it's a substantial increase, and obviously when I purchased the property, I mean its costs and overhead were part of my decision, and it's been thrown to the wind right now.
Yeah.
Well, and remember, too, that it's, the status of the improvement as of January 1st. So, the assessment date and, the status of a property as of January 1st is the date that we, use, so.
Okay, I'm going to bring it back to the board. Steve?
One more question for Scotty. If the assessed value were the 1.5, what would be, there would be some refund of the tax money, is that correct?
Yes.
And how much would that be?
That would be, it's stated on page 001, $2,062.70.
For the 1.5 valuation?
If approved.
No,
If that would be if it were 1.5. No.
That would be if it were adjusted to what his requested value was.
But may I ask a question, please? I didn't quite understand that. So are you telling me now that that refund of, I think you said 2,000 something, would that bring my annual tax down to $4,000
No,
in that area?
I misspoke. My apologies.
It didn't sound that way, okay.
If we bring it down to the requested value you have submitted, Rudy, then it would be a refund of $2,662.
That would make me really happy, but go ahead.
If we bring it down to the 1.5, it's going to be different.
What would it be?
So you take the 1.5
I don't
times
have a calculator. Somebody has a calculator.
7.96%. Do you have a calculator?
Yeah, I have to take it.
Well, the point is, we're dealing with an assessed valuation, not the difference
the
in the
refund.
taxes at this point,
Correct.
Steve. So, Rachel?
Yeah, you know, again, I greatly appreciate your taking the time to discuss this with you, and I know how awkward teleconferences are. I hope some of our questions has illuminated the differences in processes in looking at this. And, you know, I want to assure you that our assessors work through a process that is then verified or challenged by the state of Colorado. And our assessor's office has to answer to the state of Colorado should we be under-assessing or over-assessing properties. Our chairman has alluded to the fact there is a next step, which is to take our decision to the state appeals process. I realize, again, that's hard to do from afar, but I'm really not finding anything in here that would allow me to go much further than the offer of the assessor to move the value down to 1.5 million for tax purposes. And so I would make a motion to uphold the assessor's recommendation for an adjustment to $1.5 million value for the 2012 tax year on schedule number 21438.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much for your time and your interest in this, and again, you do have the ability to appeal this further up if you so desire.
Will I get any documented paperwork on this hearing now?
Yeah, I'll be sending him.
Yes.
We'll send you the minutes.
Okay. I'd be curious to know what some of those numbers in actuality are. Like, what does my tax come down to with the offer that was made to me versus what?
So
Well, I
the-
heard what it was if it were granted at the numbers that I feel are correct, which would be about 4,000, and I have no idea what would the other figure bring my tax to.
Rudy,
But, like I said, if I get all this in front of me, in clear paperwork, and which I assume that I will get, I'll have a further decision. I really don't want to go any further with it. Those things usually, I have to hire a lawyer, and that expense is something I don't want to go through, or let alone just agree for dealing with a legal situation.
Rudy, I can call you when I get back to the office and give you what the tax bill will be, and then, of course, we will follow up with the paperwork from the meeting this morning.
I would appreciate that very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and that's it for today. Is that it for today?
I think so, yes.
We already made a motion on the other three that have withdrawn.
Okay, so I will adjourn our special meeting, and we're done a little early, but we're due to back here till at 1 o'clock, so we've got a
Longer lunch to catch up
longer
on
lunch
business.
hour. So we're back at 1 o'clock. Thank you, Grassroots.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I need to read to take that one.
can you?
Yeah.
right, we're back from our lunch break, and next on the agenda is the Aspen County Airport Design Guidelines and Surface Transportation Best Practices Study. And Jim Elwood is here as a director from the airport. And company, I see Tim Malloy is just joining us.
Sorry,
welcome.
Highway was a bit slow today.
Well, thank you, Board. Appreciate a chance to be here. Once again, Jim Elwood, I'm the airport director. I'm joined today by Tim Malloy, who will be our contractor consultant on the project. I think I was going to give you a little bit of background on kind of how we got here and refresh everyone's memory about this project and what brought us to this conversation today. Specifically, this concept came from the master plan work that we did as part of the airport master plan. And the issue was brought up along the way that perhaps we needed to put more specifics to any changes that might occur at the airport in the future and make sure that we really were representing what the community values were, how we could define those and get into what would be a technical and what I would classify as a pretty meaty document that would discuss things like architectural components, colors, site improvements, energy targets, all the things that you might expect as putting together items that really do kind of capture what we want the airport to feel, look like, and accomplish should any physical changes occur at the airport into the future. So this was a way to really kind of put our arms around the specifics of any changes that we'd have at the airport. And another example might be signage. How would we go about that? Would it have and be multilingual is a question that would come from this. So it's going to be different than some of the other planning documents that we've worked on at the airport over the years, because this one will be very technical in nature and really driven toward being able to take this document, we're not sure how heavy it'll be, but I suspect somewhat meaty, and hand it off. If someone came to us and said, we'd like to do something at the airport, or we decide to do something with the terminal building, we'd refer to this document to make sure that we were hitting on all those targets. Additionally, in this project is transportation best practices. As we went through the public input process and the various review entities and the master plan again, we heard that folks wanted us to look at how to be less reliant on rental cars and how can we be smart about how we move people to and from the airport and look at other communities and make sure that we're paying attention and that we're on the cutting edge about how we can really improve the mobility component to the airport while reducing dependence on regular four tires on the ground kind of transportation. So with all that said, I'm going to kind of turn it over to Tim to talk a little bit more about how he sees the project and is going to formulate it. But the real question in front of you is we've looked to put together a group of locals that are really going to help us on this project, along with some interface with the Board of County Commissioners. So we end up with a product that everybody feels like hits the mark. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim and let him roll with it.
Thank you, Jim. Again, my name is Tim Malloy, TG Malloy Consulting, and in addition to myself, the project team includes the firms of Blue Green, Charles Cuniff and Associates, and J Aviation. And on behalf of the team, I want to just express that we're very excited to help the airport, the Board of County Commissioners, and the community come up with a set of design guidelines that will be effective. And I want to just discuss quickly the public input process that we contemplate for the project, and then I want to describe some of the components of the plan itself as we see it, so that you get a sense for the level of detail and the kind of information that we're going to be looking at developing for you. There are essentially 5 components of the public input process, and the first is to incorporate a review of the public input and key findings that have been developed over the past couple of years in this area, including the airport master plan of 2012, which was adopted last December, as well as the AACP and the ongoing west of Maroon Creek planning process, which we have participated in, and other various documents and information that have been developed recently, including some FAA circulars related to airport operation and design and so forth. The second component is the task force, and we have contemplated a relatively small task force that involves people with expertise in design and planning, as well as residents of surrounding neighborhoods, tenants of the airport, people who rely on the airport for their business. And the reason for utilizing a smaller group of people is because we want to move through a fairly technical and significantly large amount of volume of information and develop these guidelines over a relatively short period of time. The second component of the public input is we're also going to be doing some focus group meetings with tenants of the airport, the rental car operators, the airlines, etc. A third component is an open house, which we would anticipate would occur between work sessions 5 and 6. After we've developed a draft of the document and before we do refinement, we're going to be touching base with the community, seeking input broadly from the community. And then we're also going to be going through an adoption process with the Board of County Commissioners, which will be a first and second reading with the public hearing. So we anticipate, obviously advertising that public hearing and participating with the BOCC and the airport, helping assist through that adoption process. So we feel like this is the right component of public input for the kind of document that we're going to be preparing. What is that document? There are essentially 6 sections of this document. The first one is design guidelines oriented toward architecture. That is to say that we're anticipating a new terminal building, and that's going to have very significant architectural review process associated with it, but we're going to be trying to set some sort of broad terms for that design process. General building massing, setbacks from the roads, how parking is handled. The second section of the document is design guidelines related specifically to site improvements, and site improvements are parking, exterior lighting, walls, landscaping, etc. And so we're going to be creating those same sort of overarching framework for site improvements as well. And in case I haven't mentioned it, the document is intended to apply to all future development at the airport. So we're going to be looking at a fairly broad set of components in terms of the guidelines themselves. The third section is construction impacts and management. We want to make sure that the work that's done at the airport is done in a manner that's minimally interruptive to the community and creates the fewest impacts possible, et cetera. And then we're also talking about project review process, so that's going to be looking at how the design guidelines are actually used, the establishment of a committee or committees to actually manage review of projects pursuant to the guidelines. And then the fifth component is relationship to other standards and regulations, such as the location and expense review process that the Community Development Department manages, the fact that that is a Planning Commission review, and it is subject to review of the applicable master plans, which in this case is the AACP and will be the West of Maroon plan once that has been adopted, which I think is going to be occurring relatively shortly. And lastly, we're going to be having a section that looks at compliance monitoring and documentation of compliance, so that we make sure that once these guidelines are utilized, that the intent of them is continued to be honored throughout the development process, so that the final projects reflect the community's desires and concerns as expressed through these design guidelines. So that's kind of a brief overview of the work that we see in general. We want to have this document be relatively graphically oriented, so that it is, easy to use and clearly understood. And with respect to the task force, we envision that group being a input group. We're not talking about a consensus process with voting. We're talking about giving everybody an opportunity to share concerns to help us develop the guidelines. Again, it's a relatively small group and includes planners, architects, residents, tenants, etc. And that is the main focus of today's discussion is whether or not you feel that the recommendations that we've given you in the packet reflect your feelings about the appropriate group for that process. In terms of next steps, of course, assuming the board approves the task force today, we would inform them and begin the process of scheduling those task force meetings, and we're looking at doing 6 meetings over the next 5 to 6 months in order to try and get this work done by the end of the year. And then developing the background information and getting ready for that first task force meeting. We anticipate that 2 of the 6 meetings that we have recommended in this process include the full Board of County Commissioners, so that you have an opportunity to weigh in significantly on the progress of the work. We anticipate you participating in the first meeting, the kickoff meeting, to help us set sort of the core values and get a clear understanding of the board's position with respect to the key issues. And then around the 4th meeting, which is the point at which we're going to have a draft of the document fairly well developed, and it's before we go into sort of final refinement. So that is kind of an outline of the process and the purpose of the task force, and a little bit about what we anticipate the document being, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Questions? Steve and Rob?
You have a list of names of proposed people to be on the committee, and have you approached these people at this point to find out about their willingness and ability to serve, or is this a wish list?
And I've spoken with everyone except for John Howard, the Planning Commission member, who I think had expressed willingness to participate before we, really develop this list fully. I'm actually going to see him this evening, and we'll have a chance to talk with him. But everyone on the list, other than John, has expressed a willingness to participate.
Okay.
Rob?
Are we unique as a community in doing this, or are there other airports around the country that have design guidelines, surface transportation best practices, studies and documents already done?
Well, there are other airports that have done design guidelines, and they really reflect anywhere from 6 pages of kind of conceptual, high-level thought process to more detailed programs. We're looking on the more detailed program, which is a fairly rare group of airports to be in. The best practices study, I'm not aware of another airport that's gone down that path before. There probably has been. But I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to kind of pause and see if we can gather gems from other places that we can transfer to our community. And that's so hopefully we find those real kind of neat ideas, and we're able to integrate them into our operation.
I guess it would be real useful to know what's out there first. And it sounds like there isn't much. You said like a 6-page document at some other airport based on their guidelines. I mean, obviously we have our county guidelines for building. So this is kind of a more specific set of restrictions and ideas and thoughts regarding a county asset. And the development that potentially might go on there that's particularly visible to our travelers, not just through the airport, but up and down Highway 82 and the residents around that area. But I'd be really curious if Nantucket hasn't done one, Martha's, the smaller type airports, because they're very specifically design oriented in what's able to be built in their land use code in those areas. And it would at least give us a basis to be around. Another question I had was, why are these two things being tackled together? I mean, it seems to me like they're completely separate things. And, yes, they have to work with one another, just like the AACP has to work with the WOMP, and has to work with our land use code and various things like that. But they're separate. I mean, one is about transportation and one is about design stuff?
You know, those are really great questions, and we asked ourselves that when we went through the procurement process. Did it make sense to link these since they may have some touch points, or whether to have them run separately as projects? And after a debate, we determined that it made sense to have them go together. They are separate issues. They're going to end up with separate components, or a different chapter, if you will, or even a standalone document. But that the kind of folks that needed to be created to put together the team was actually not that far apart. And, you know, with the core focus being kind of logic and good common sense going together. And so that's how we decided to address the issue, Rob, as we went through the procurement and the candidates, which ultimately came to TG Malloy, was that we could successfully get this project done under one banner.
And if you, one of the sections of the subsections of the design guidelines is neighborhood impacts and neighborhood compatibility, and that includes traffic impacts, parking, and those things. I think those two processes are going to inform each other as we move along. And there will be some interaction. They're somewhat distinct. They're essentially sort of two teams, but there will be some interaction between the teams. And we do anticipate that the best practices group will meet with the task force on at least two of the meetings, meeting number 1 and number 4. And the meeting in the number 4 meeting is where we anticipate that the findings of that shorter, more condensed best practices effort will be presented to the task force for discussion and comment.
And then another comment that I had was, and you did a phenomenal job with the airport master plan, and Open Space and Trails does a great job with their master plans, but let's make sure that we have a good, comprehensive online presence for following this process for the public and having information be put on it where comments can be made and that sort of stuff. I think we saw how useful that is through the airport master plan and things like the Rio Grande Trail comments or the Sky Mountain Park comments that we got online. And so there's a lot. Every time we do it as a county, we do it a little bit better. So let's continue that trend.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you, George. I have a number of different questions as well. Hopefully they're relatively short. But the best practices group, would that also be looking then at amenities, internal amenities, to say this should be sure to be designed so there are recharging stations in the new furniture of the thing, or, you know, these are the types of amenities we want in our airport? Are they going to look at some of the best practices of best new amenities that airports are putting in and making recommendations? Or
well, that's not really the scope of that was described when we started off on the process. It's really about this, by the way, came out of a recommendation of the Planning Commission when they were reviewing the master plan, and they said, boy, it would be nice to do a transportation study associated with the airport, which was more than the airport could bite off by itself.
Sure.
But they did end up, boiling down to this idea: why don't you look and see what other airports are doing to, similar airports are doing to minimize the impacts of the surface transportation. So it's really focused on that.
okay, so best practices is all transportation, design is all the other things. Well, then, even within the design group, it would seem that with the old rule of form follows function, we need to really identify the functions and amenities we'd like within the airport in order to influence the design later.
I think your point's really well taken, Rachel. I would add a subsequent benefit that I would expect to come from this is anytime you start to study how you're doing business and compare it to anyone else and take some of those other inputs, whether it's Nantucket or wherever, is that you usually come away with some other additional benefits that weren't part of your target. So that may be related to charging stations or some unrelated point.
Yeah.
But our intent is to make sure that when we cast this net out, that if we can learn how to be smarter, better, or offer a better experience across the board, that we're constantly searching for that, and that will continue through this process.
Yeah, because I know that any structure is always readapted for new uses internally. You know, our offices here are re-subdivided more frequently than anyone would like. But I just think that there should be discussion about should the little shop be something that can close off and close early and be secure, or it should be more integrated into the airport. Maybe our airport's too small to do the way they do in larger airports, where it's more of an open design and it becomes part of the experience while you're waiting for people or things like that, as opposed to, oh, let's put that in that corner. And I mean, there's no fault to be discussing in this, but I really have looked at how the airport baggage area and rental car area over time has been, oh, well, let's put these advertising boxes around these posts because then we can sell more advertising here. And it's like, wait a second, that doesn't look all that good. These, you know, and so I just don't want things to be afterthoughts that are then added on when someone says, well, where are we going to put this, you know, as kind of thinking of it as a furnishing component when it really should be part of the design component coming in. And so that's why I think at least understanding what amenities we are shooting for on the interior and how we hope to serve the guest will help drive the design later. I don't see it as all an exterior process, whereas at some level it may be mostly exterior, but if it's not designed to house the things we need, you know, how large of a changing area for baby diapers should really be in the restroom. You know, things like that, where, and, you know, too often it's just an afterthought, oh, we'll fit one of those diaper changer fold-out things over in this corner. And I want to make sure we're not doing that. The second would be that, you know, I have been through design review processes before. We set up guidelines for the initial Burlingame 1 phase, and it was selected, I think, to be a ranch vernacular type of components, and they had a lot of visuals of what we were drawing from within our own community to say this should be the design model, and then some line drawings as well. And then that document, to whatever extent, whenever there's a bid for an airport that goes out, is something that all the competitors have to show how they're trying their best to live up to this goal. And they have many different takes on it, obviously. But I think that, you know, we should also have what it is not. You know, what we do not want this building to look utilitarian. You know, and I think you'll find in a lot of airports and a lot of communities, it's all about, you know, just function and nothing really thought to the architectural elements. And so I think we really do need to make, as you said, a very graphic document. The other example would be our historic guidelines, historic preservation guidelines, where we have some really good do it this way, don't do it this way on specific types of components. I think that, and I'm not sure if I really got this or not because you mentioned energy usage goals, but I think there really should also be water usage goals as well. And that's obviously a combination of exterior and interior, but you don't want someone designing a building at some point that, well, we're going to hide this and this and this and this with all these big trees, and then say, okay, well, look, what's our water usage going to be on those? I want to make sure it's very integrated and very integrated for the energy efficiency components and the energy standards. And I guess my last comment at this time is that looking at this list, the only thing I'm not really seeing is like the city of Aspen and Accra, you know, who I think, you know, if anyone is going to hear from the guests about their experience at the airport, it's going to be the airport hostess program, it's going to be Accra, it's going to be, you know, whether it's Accra or Stay Aspen Snowmass, you know, somewhere between the two. I'd like someone who really is more of a direct connection with the visitor. Mm-hmm. And it would perhaps seem appropriate to consider asking the city of Aspen or the town of Snowmass Village if they would like someone on it as well. It is the major avenue to visit both of those communities, and I think they all take a lot of pride in our airport, and certainly you're servicing the airport a lot. On the transportation side, the best practice is you will be working with RAFTA, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I think that talking to a couple of the lodges, the major lodges that have the courtesy vans, and be able to talk about their guest experience and the pickup and drop off of the courtesy van folks as well would make some sense. And it may really bring together how do we use transportation better if we can integrate their services in with RAFTA more. So those are my initial thoughts. It does strike me, I don't know if any others on the board would agree, but we don't have like a quote, airport user, someone who's not a stakeholder in that classic sense, but maybe someone who's a Pickens County resident, flies a lot, sees a lot of airports, and is just an airport user for that, kind of every person's on the street viewpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have several of those listed here, some of the neighbors who would actively use the airport.
I think they're neighbors looking at how does that affect my view, as opposed to a user who, because it's all of Pickens County's airport, whether you're living in Aspen Village or Woody Creek or the Frying Pan, and so that's more of what I'm thinking than.
Yeah, I guess my concern on that is, and I don't object to having this list expand, because that's what we're here for, to discuss that with other representation. But I would want to make sure that if we bring someone else in, that they will also have participated with the master plan, so we're not trying to bring someone up to speed, because most of these folks have been involved. So if there was someone from the city or ACRA or Snowmass that did participate in the master plan, that would make sense. But for someone who really wasn't part of that process, I think would really slow up that whole process.
Yeah, well, I think that whoever serving on this has got to understand there's a given, and that is the foundation is the airport master plan, which has been passed for various reasons. But I know we've been talking about how do we have better communication, say, with the Aspen City Council, and have them feel integrated into this process. And so, whether they can designate a council member or someone from staff, so they feel like it's not presented to them at the end of the day that this is what our design guidelines came to, without making you guys schedule a separate meeting with the Aspen City Council. It makes more sense perhaps to have a city council member on the task force.
Here are other thoughts. I would lean more towards having a staff member from city who worked on the master plan versus having an elected official. Michael?
So let me get this straight. So these design guidelines are general guidelines, like what? Give me for instance.
Okay. And there are a number of examples that I think we could use. So one of the things that we'll look at are building massing. And some of that will flow out of the work that's being done right now with the Planning Commission on the Western Maroon Plan. Talks about the setback, talks about how visible it is, the role of landscape and screening the building. Lighting will be, I think, an important discussion. So we'll be talking about not necessarily the fixtures that we're going to be using, but what do we want to accomplish with the lighting? Given that the airport, and lighting is a particularly good, I think, example, because the airport is unique among all county land uses with respect to lighting. And it has, for example, by mandatory uplighting, which is not allowed under the county's design guidelines and land use code and lighting regulations. So we're going to be talking about what do we want to accomplish within the confines of what we must do for the airport. It has flashing lights, for example. And what's the best way to minimize our impacts with respect to lighting while still providing the functions that the airport needs. So we're not going to be getting to the specifics of exactly what the lighting fixtures are or exactly what the materials are, but we will be talking in detail about what we're trying to accomplish with that lighting plan, those lighting guidelines, and those architectural materials kinds of guidelines.
And that goal reaches back to sort of the initial phase of that airport planning, which was people said, well, I like the airport as it is, and I like these features. I like to be able to drive up, I like to be able to park, I like the low impact. Yeah. I like the low profile. I like the feeling that it's my airport, so forth and so on.
I like the experience of coming into the landscape, not so much as a parking lot.
Right. So that these design guidelines hark back to that
That's right.
notion.
Yeah, those will be among the core values that we'll be talking about at the very first meeting.
So those design guidelines will come out of those core values that you guys discovered very early in the project, right?
Yes.
And try to keep a sense of those core values throughout any construction
Correct.
at the airport, so we don't get a glaring departure from what we have now, essentially.
Correct.
Or, I mean, it'll be different, but it'll reflect some of those same values.
Yeah, we don't want to get so specific that we stymie creativity in the design process. But we do want to be clear about the fact that this community has some very specific perspectives in terms of design, architecture, landscaping, visibility, visual impacts, etc.
Yeah, okay.
It's always a challenge to design by committee.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen that.
Yeah, there's a great story about how you put a committee together to design a racehorse and you end up with a camel. That's the thing we don't want to do here. But, you know, if you hearken back to the early phases of the master plan that Michael just mentioned, but it was also very powerfully transferred in the tours, because we did over 40 tours in that public process. And it was amazing how consistent that people were about, you know, in that case, it mostly came out relative to the terminal building. And it wasn't that they were so fond of our existing structure, you know, that it had some kind of emotional connection to them, but that it was the atmosphere that our current terminal creates, and they don't want that lost, you know, when we try to make any changes that might occur in the future. And so that was really kind of fun to hear as an airport person, because I think all those things can get accomplished and have a very functional building in the end. And this is one step in there, just to formalize them, to get them down, and to work through something that really helps guide us. Because one of the anxieties that you probably heard as well was that we get carried away and do something that was out of character to the community. And this is a way to help ground us to, you know, those values and make sure that we're doing the right thing that matches, to the best of our ability, the community's thoughts about their airport.
Rachel?
So just kind of thinking this through a bit further, and it is quite a ways down the pike, but there may be a point in time in which this board chooses to say, okay, we're going to have a design competition for an airport that does X of these sizes using these design guidelines. And although it'll just be schematic, we would then see from a certain number of people who we've chosen for the design competition. I guess another route would be a classic design build, and you choose an architect builder team, and then you start them off, and then so either way, you're either going to be coming in and seeing 5 proposals or so, or 1. And you don't want to get there at that point and say, well, I didn't think it was going to look anything like this. You know, I don't like any of these 5 designs, you know. So we have to offer some guidance going in. And I guess what I'm wondering is, this is something that your group will hash through and perhaps come to a conclusion that says, we don't want faux Victorian. You know, we don't want you to design a building that's a faux Victorian, or we don't want fake log cabin stuff, or maybe it's just a general point that says we don't want Disneyland and we don't want it to look like, you know, a new high-end timeshare club entrance, you know. So we will be getting to those, I mean, because it's design guidelines, or is it just, are we going to get to some level of preferred architectural styles versus, you know, hey, it's off the table, we don't want this over here?
Yes. We
Yes.
will get to some discussions about preferred architectural styles and things that we want to avoid.
Okay.
So, yes.
Okay.
Just another way it's been useful, at least as I've come to understand it, the master plan kind of provided some broad vision and even some broad goals. And as we go into this process, we get more towards defining some more specific objectives that we want any future designs for facilities at the airport to meet or avoid. You know, objectives could be things that we want to steer away from or things that we want to steer towards, but we're not designing the facility. So I also want to just be really clear for those who might be watching that this process, we are not going to come out with any specific facility designs. Again, we're setting those clear objectives by which any future facility design or programming would have to meet in order to be acceptable and a good amenity for the community. And so I kind of see it as a narrowing down from the master plan discussion to be more specific, and that means the discussions get more detailed and difficult, and that's why you see so much expertise in planning, architecture, and building on the committee versus, we feel like a lot of the goals have already been set through the discussions that we've had.
Okay. One other follow-up question, George. This is for the airport master plan. Is it for applicability to a second FBO should there be an application for one? It's not just the main terminal.
That's right. It's for all future projects at the airport.
Thank you.
Rob?
And regarding that, where is this document going to lie? Does it lie within our land use code? Does it lie within the airport master plan? Does it, this is going to be a regulatory document over development just because
A review
we
document.
own the airport and we can do what we want with?
Really more the latter. It will not reside in your land use code for some reasons that we probably don't need to go into today, but we will discuss through the process somewhat. But it will be among the documents that you, as owners of the airport, require that any project that is going to occur on your land will have to honor. And there will be as we envision it, there'll be a committee that's assigned to essentially doing like a design review, which is very common in modern subdivisions, to make sure that the projects that are submitted to you honor those guidelines.
And how will the FAA play a role in this as well? Because they kind of have some authority over our airport as well.
They will play a role in many ways, and one of those will be that one of the first components of the process will be to gather and help the task force understand those critical design features that the FAA controls, the standards which are critical, things like obstruction, lighting as is required for certain kinds of facilities. That information will be shared with the task force, so it will be informing the task force up front and throughout the process when we stray from something that works from an FAA standpoint, which is why we have J'Aviation, the airport's aviation engineering firm, as part of the team.
And naturally, we'd be addressing ADA standards and everything like that through the task force as well.
Michael?
So, so these 6 meetings, more or less, they're going to be public meetings.
They'll be open to the public. We suggest that the 2 meetings that include the board members be televised and be, available for review on the website. And we do actually already have a niche in the existing airport planning website for this project, and so we will be, posting our work product on that website.
But when these people meet, the public can attend and listen to these meetings. So if it were somebody from another municipality, they could listen, and then they could submit comments at a later date to that committee saying, well, that's not really a natural element, I view that, and so forth and so on.
That's right, yes.
So there'll be fairly open public comment on this, should it be necessary, or should people be interested in doing it?
So to that point, then people will be able to access on the web to actually make comments that you'll be gathering?
Yeah, I imagine we'll set up, as we did for the airport master plan, a sort of a blog or a place for people to post comments regarding the process and their thoughts and so forth, yes.
Steve?
It seems like the people who work at the airport the most frequently would have really good ideas on the deficiencies or things that places they could see could be improved. And I know that there'd be a point where they could have input into this, but are you planning on soliciting from them specifically?
We are.
Ideas and like brainstorming and trying to improve their work areas or the customer service they provide or whatever?
Yeah, we actually have two what we call focus group meetings specifically for airport tenants and staff, because we agree their input is going to be incredibly valuable as people who walk around, observe oddities, problems, issues at the airport all the time. Yes.
So in general, what you're asking today is whether, sort of a nod, whether we approve the process that you're presenting as well as the task force as presented, with Rachel's suggestion is perhaps adding a few, but that's really what you're asking for.
Correct.
So,
And if you are not fully pleased with the task force as identified on the list that we provided you in the agenda item summary, the vehicle by which we can get your approval of add-ons or removals without necessarily having to come back so that we can move that process along.
So I guess the first question is the board comfortable with the process in terms of the layout with the meetings and the schedule as presented? No other suggestions for that? Okay, and then the second part would be looking at the committee. Is everyone pretty comfortable with at least the inclusion of the current list? Yes. And then would anybody like to see the additional of a few more?
I'm satisfied with the list as it stands, and I think given the fact that people can attend and express interest through either posting or writing specific letters, I think that's sufficient, because it seems to me we're not designing the terminal at this point. We're just saying, for instance, we're not going to clad the building in stainless steel. It'll be in natural materials or natural appearing materials, something like that. That seems to me not, when we come to the design, it seems to me then a broader community outreach, but this seems good. I mean, I like these people on this board. I like the fact that many of them are professionals, and I'm satisfied with this particular aspect.
Rachel?
I'm more than satisfied that these people will be participating. I just think that it would be valuable to, again, interweave to some extent with Stay Aspen Snowmass or ACRA, because they deal with customer complaints and customer concerns all the time, and also run that airport hostess program out there. And so I just think that that would be a valuable link to make into this. And I know that when we went through the airport master plan, there were different times in which the city seemed to feel we were getting way ahead of them, or they hadn't had a chance to comment, and we did a lot of catching up and brought it back to the same pace. But I'd like to, avoid that this time and ask them for that type of participation. They are property owners nearby, eventually will be as affected by this and as the North 40 residents are. And so I don't think that really expands the group unnecessarily and may save future meetings and future catch-up. I guess I'm not as sure as Michael expressed it about how much input we'll have into the design later. What is the intent after the design guidelines are complete, vetted, public hearing, finalized? I don't know that we then start designing the building with someone else. I mean, at that point, you work with other professionals. So if this says no stainless steel clapping, that's great. That'll be clear direction to whoever is designing it. But I don't know that we then re-dig into starting to design the building. And so, again, that's why I was thinking the amenity features and things like that would be very important to have outlined as desirable elements in the design guidelines.
I think this is a very important point. If the board didn't mind, I respond.
Please.
The airport actually anticipates a very extensive public involvement in the design process of the terminal in particular once that gets going, with a broad, open, competitive selection process for the team and a substantial community input process with probably a committee of some kind, perhaps not unlike the master plan committee, with participation on the part of the board. And so we anticipate a very substantial community input process in the design of the building. That will be oncoming.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah.
And that work will build off of this work.
Correct.
Other thoughts in terms of the committee adding or leaving as it is? Steve?
Oh, not about the makeup of the committee, but it's about part of the whole process. And I think you referred to this a little bit, Jim, on one of the airport tours, but rather than design a building or the airport for the worst case scenario to accommodate hundreds of people waiting for the storm to pass or whatever, if we could design a process whereby the people don't come to the airport until they need to go to the airport because the planes are flying. Keep them at their hotels or their condos or elsewhere besides at the airport. We might be able to keep the airport a little more modest size by doing that, and I don't know how that would work into this process, but of the design, but designing the system for getting the people to the airport at the appropriate time when they need to get there would be what I'm thinking of.
Well, I think there's an opportunity there, and things are kind of shifting as technology has shifted the way that we go about flying. I noticed the other day that I think it's Alaska has a unattended boarding process at the gate. So as you go to board the airplane after going through security and you're in the last steps, we currently hand our ticket to someone and they scan it or whatever. That there wouldn't necessarily be an attendant there. So there's a shift in the way that technology is impacting travel. And coming more specific to arrival at the airport, I think we're getting far better data about the status of flights. We've got the ability to do flight tracker and other things to know where the airplane is relative to being ready to go wherever the customer's trying to get to. The point of all that is that the ability to communicate with the customer and have them be where they want to be when it's the most opportune moment is changing and really moving quickly. And I think as we get into a deeper process when and if we talk about a terminal building in great detail, is to make sure that we're wired and we're capable of transmitting information to people promptly and in this system, and anticipate. Who would have guessed smartphones would do what they do 10 years ago? And some of that kind of prediction is going to be fun to forecast.
Rob, committee input?
I think the committee is fine as it stands. If some people want to participate and we see to add a few, that's fine too.
So I'm comfortable if you want to add one or two people. I would, again, my requirements would be that they have been involved in the master plan throughout the whole process, so they're up to speed, and that they make the commitment to, just like these people, they all make the commitment to make all these meetings to keep this process moving forward.
Thank you. We'll go back and consider. We do know of a couple of people who were engaged in the master plan who might be willing to participate, and so we'll reach out to those individuals. We do intend to make the requirement that if you're unable to attend and it's unavoidable that you're out of country or what have you, that you not send an alternate. I think it's really important that the continuity of the thought process for each member to be there is going to be valuable as we move to completion. So we appreciate your time today.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess some of you are not going very far. Maybe both of you. I don't know. The next on the agenda is the Aspen-Pitkin County Airport Future Air Service Planning Study.
As Tim collects himself and moves off the table, This is a follow-up to a work session we had with the board a couple weeks ago. You asked us to bring it back very quickly, and so we've done that. And it stemmed from the conversation about air service. And that work session a few weeks ago really focused on where we were at and some short-term objectives that we were thinking about to enhance our commercial air service at the airport, our airline service. From that conversation, we started to talk about maybe we need to future cast a little bit further out on the horizon, and that there were changes identified by our air service consultant that resulted in us kind of saying maybe we need to pause, think about what those issues might be, and how we want to consider our airport and how we want to position ourselves into the future. And when we went back and started to kind of pull together the scope, which is in front of you and kind of talks about 3 different phases, we felt the most important one to start with in phase 1 was to really understand what we think is happening in the airline business and start to think about how those aircraft, and I'm talking about regional jets, the aircraft size that we've historically had relative to seats and capabilities, what do we think is changing in that market, and what are the aircraft that might be coming online, and how would they fit or operate or not fit at our airport, and start to really kind of narrow down and get a more factual base to work from. What are the issues at play? What are we thinking that would result in our viability as commercial air service moving forward? So that kind of represents the first kind of phasing of what I'm proposing to you to be kind of a 3-phased project. If we find out through that process, and we stop and check in with the board, and if you want us to proceed to the following subsequent phases, we'd start to understand how those aircraft or those changes in the airline business integrate into our facility and start to do kind of some of the what-if issues that might be at play. I can't emphasize enough how specific this would be relative to regional aircraft that are of the same historic seat counts that we've seen at our airport. I heard at the previous work session very, very clearly a concern to avoid things like industrial tourism and really some things that are counter to what we believe in here, and somewhat reflects what the conversation we just talked about, design guidelines, our core values and such. So phase 1, understand the issue. Phase 2, start to understand what that means to us as a facility if the board tells us to go forward. And then another check-in point that kind of comes back, and if the board decides for us to go through a little more deeper analysis of what could be coming to us, including some environmental analysis and those kind of things. So the cool part about how we tried to structure this was multiple check-in points, which I think is something that came out of the work session a few weeks ago, and just to better understand where the viability of our commercial air service might take us into the future, and make sure that we're doing our due diligence as viewing air service, on the longer term.
Jim, along with our previous discussion in regards to design and surface transportation studies, this will be another component when we might be reviewing applications for a second FBO that may determine if, when, where, and how that might occur.
Well, George, I think you hit on a really, really strong point. And I think every time we look at something at the airport, what we know is that it really does kind of impact certain other points on the airport. So the building block process that we've been taking along the way, be it through the master plan or now with the design guidelines and others, they really do have touching corners, and they're really important for us to do in a certain kind of sequence and realize that they impact each other. So I concur with your comment very much.
Questions? Rachel, and then Michael.
Yeah, I had mentioned before at some other meeting that I have read that prop planes are also kind of making a resurgence in the industry, although not at these longer distances, obviously, because of the reduced fuel cost. And I think that we should make sure to not miss that component and that trend as to what role they may play, whether it's just connecting with Denver or whether it's other components. And then just to ask about a couple of these terms, under Phase 1, the second bullet point, consideration of future fleet mix and impacts on air service development. Does the word consideration mean kind of could be listing the pros and cons of some of these various planes so that, should they now be louder or more quiet, we'll have some greater description about what the planes are like?
Yes. I mean, I think we're really fortunate, and as you know from previous noise analysis that we've done at the airport, the noise modeling, there's been significant improvement in terms of lowering the noise in surrounding neighborhoods as a general rule. And so the airplanes have become quieter over time, and every indication is that the future aircraft will be even quieter with less emissions, less impactful issues than the aircraft that we even have currently.
Okay, so it'll have like the remaining future life of the type of aircraft now and what's in development and things like that. The one last question, again, I kind of throw it out to the board, but I have to wonder whether under Phase 1 there should be a goals for future air service, or whether we need to develop that afterwards. But it's really hard to evaluate and make these decisions. Should our goal be, the peak of availability of carriers and seats that we had, 98 or whatever year it was, or should we be projecting forward to 2020 and say our goal would be to have X many seats in the winter and X many seats in the summer by the year 2020? But I just don't know how to evaluate any of this information we get if we don't have goals for how much capacity and how much air service we hope for.
Well, it really does kind of beg to the question about what does future viability feel like. And
so you have a financial model as well as a maybe guest service model?
Very well could be. Now, I think John's mentioned to you in previous conversations that there's an air service development group that's trying to get kind of their feet under them and thinking about some of these issues as well. So I certainly see an opportunity to be very closely integrated, and there may be goals that come from that group that end up kind of getting brought into this analysis. And I think quite likely it'll turn out that way, as a matter of fact. So if they don't, then I think we can certainly talk about goals and it could be market share, as an example. We've been blessed with United Airlines as a very strong presence in our community, but there are times when it feels like maybe that's a stronger market share than maybe it's comfortable to some. So those opportunities, I think, will get injected in this along the way.
So we were talking about the opportunities for competitiveness that may offer both a better variety of choices and times and carriers, but also perhaps enough competitiveness to affect ticket pricing.
Yes.
And so all those kind of, so again, I at least will have a hard time making much of this without some goals to know that this choice will lead to that goal.
You may recall from the work session a few weeks ago, I mean, there's a person, and well, I think it's highly unlikely, and I don't mean to bring undue concern to the table, but with two, in essence, commercial aircraft today that can operate at our airport that are common in the airline fleet. The Q400 aircraft that Frontier flew is one of those turboprops that you just mentioned, Rachel. Has been here, operates well here, but that airplane's not currently in our market because the airline that sold those airplanes. So our challenge there, the CRJ 700, which both American and SkyWest fly, has a finite lifespan. Which one of the things we'd want to track down in here is to define that more closely. Some industry experts believe that's somewhere between 7 and 12 years. and it'll be no longer in the fleet. So do we know that to be a fact? I think that's part of the clarification process here.
Thank you.
Michael?
Yeah, I mean, the discussion seems to me in phase one is about what is, and what is coming towards us in terms of the industry itself. In other words, the airplane building industry doing. The other questions about what our goals were, we wouldn't know until after this phase one, quite frankly. And also, what are the, because it seems to me not just us about what our expectations at the airport, it's the community's expectations, whether it's the ski company, or whether it's tourists who visit here, or whether it's local users who want to use the airport for whatever purposes. We wouldn't know that until we get through phase one, which is, what are the planes going to look like? What's their size? I mean, it's interesting that on NPR this morning they were talking about the Paris Air Show, and that's a time for people to decide what kind of airplanes are out there. What am I going to buy? What's available? How am I going to transport my clients? And one of the upshots of that was that people don't want large very large four-engine planes. They haven't got as many orders as they thought. This is Airbus and Boeing, but they want two-engine planes that are large, but not as large as the really big ones. And so nobody can anticipate until the clients start saying, this is what we'd like. So I would like to have a sort of a crystal ball of phase one. And then, given that information from phase one, then we go into community desires and needs later on in the other phases. But I'd just like to know what the airline industry is thinking of. I mean, are they not going to serve the small airports anymore? Or is the small airport going to be the airport that they want to serve? I don't know. So I think that's what phase one covers.
Just to add in, because I think when we get, you bring up a really great point about goals and how and when we have that discussion. I think when we're thinking about the scope, we know that we've got some projections on the table that have been kind of key to all of our planning assumptions. We know those go up and down annually, but roughly that we'd have an expectation that we're serving X number of people. I think that's what we would base what's that likely fleet mix going to be off of, and then given those assumptions, what are the kind of challenges, threats, strengths, weaknesses that we have going forward. But it doesn't address that just is based then, that does a problem analysis based on, based on what we have projected is going to happen, what we built our planning around, these are some of the issues. If there are other goals then on top of that the board has, because a lot of that's going to be market driven, I think, that might be something to talk about prior to going into a phase two, or as part of a phase two discussion, so that we can really analyze potential solutions against those additional goals. And Mike, I think that's kind of where you were going too.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where to place it, but I think this first one is just a crystal ball process. And it's not really our going out and asking people at these manufacturers and the airlines, what are you looking at? What are your plans? What are you going to be buying? Do you know what you're going to be buying? And how many of them are you going to buy? And so forth and so on. That's the first phase. And then secondarily, we try to fit that into our community, or what are our community needs.
Yeah. I was just looking through all three phases in my review of the memo, and I didn't see goals listed in any of the three phases. And so I'm more than happy to put it in the right place. It doesn't have to be phase one. But when we do get to phase two, and we start doing a feasibility analysis of different options to ensure future commercial air service, we have to know what our goal is for that future air service. So that's all I'm suggesting, is that there's some point in this in which we really have to get back to what makes a viable airport financially, what makes a viable airport for the guest services we expect, and things like that. And so there's some place within the 3 phases, because I'm assuming we're going forward with all 3 phases. I don't want to fund this just to do phase 1. You know, it would not be complete work if we don't go all the way through.
Jim, what sort of time frame are we looking at for this?
Well, I think it needs to be moved on quickly. The timeline that if the board's comfortable with the ads that we heard today, it'll probably take us 3 to 4 weeks to price the scope and get it underway, get back in front of you with a budget MOI. From there, I think we can move on this in a matter of months. I'd hate to tie it down a lot tighter than that today, George, just because I want a chance to kind of wear the jacket a little bit. But I think we're talking about a pretty fast-moving process.
Similar to the design 6-month process?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments?
How come you didn't go to the Paris Air Show?
I wouldn't let them.
Well, if that's where the action is, maybe next year.
Yeah, maybe.
But, you know, it is interesting. SkyWest did announce an order at the Paris Air Show. Not that that's really pertinent overall, but for a brand new next generation airplane that is yet to be fully brought to market. So, and it's made by Bombardier, Embraer, Brazilian aircraft manufacturer. So it is a very fast-paced move, and I think that's one of the reasons that we need to really compress the time window here, because it's a little, you know, things are going to be moving, and we need to have some kind of flag in the ground to understand it, and then move to the next phase, and we'll adapt if things change post.
So when SkyWest makes an order like that, that's in response to their clients, United and whoever else they serve. Is that right?
Yes.
So there are projections out there of what United and whoever else, they're already talking about it. So then SkyWest goes and goes to the manufacturers and says, well, they're making the announcement at the Paris Air Show, so it could be a year ago that they made that decision. So
Yeah, or in some cases a matter of weeks.
Really?
Yes. Now, what's really curious is that it is a little bit of a give and take kind of moment, because the aircraft manufacturers are thinking in 5 to 7 years out. So they're going to be a very valuable component in this, because they've done market analysis and where they think the trend lines are taking the industry, because their hope and desire is to hit a certain mark when the demand hits as well from the air carriers. So their ability to look into the future is very keen, because they need to have the right product at the right point in time. The air carriers, meanwhile, are be it Delta or United or whoever, they're thinking in a little shorter window as a rule, because they're trying to respond to profitability of markets in a little closer window time. And so the feedback from all those parties, such as they're willing to share with all of us, is going to be invaluable to us to produce the best forecasting and detail in phase 1 that we can. So, the aircraft manufacturers have a great deal of money riding on having the right product available at the year that the airlines want to buy it.
Right. Well, there's the development cost that they're going to shoulder, right? If they guess wrong, they have to eat it. But the inventory cost of the airlines, of their current fleet, that's a cost that they're bearing too. So, man, it's complicated.
I think that it is. It's going to be fun to collect this data, and I think there are a lot of good resources. Will there be some moments in this where we're going to have to make the best predictions of who we think the winners and losers might be? But I think it's certainly superior than to sit back and wait for trend lines to hit us in an uncomfortable moment in the future.
So quick question, does the E-175, which is the airline that they purchased or put an order in for 100 planes, could that potentially be qualified for our airport here?
Yes. That airplane, they bought they bought two sets of airplanes. The 175 current edition, they bought an order of those aircraft. The announcement, as I read it in trades earlier this week that was announced at the Paris Air Show, is for the next generation version of that aircraft. And I do not know how firm they are in design specifications, but the preliminary stats that I saw for that has fairly significant winglets on it, which are laid out at about 45 degrees, as we've now become used to. But the wingspan sits under 95, if indeed that proves to be their final design.
Okay, there's nothing else. Thank you, Jim.
Fantastic. Appreciate your help.
So we are way ahead of schedule, and I guess for the block grant information, we've got someone coming in for that, John?
We do.
Okay, so maybe we can move on to memos of interest. Do we have staff coming in for that, or?
Charlotte was going to come down. I can handle the first one. The NACO one is for information and really on two levels. One, they've made a change to their fee structure. It'll have a pretty de minimis impact on us. Our fee will go from $400 to $450 beginning in 2014. So that would be included in our 2014 budget, and unless the board, feels differently about that. I think the interesting thing about the memo is it does also lay out some specific benefits relative to Pickens County that have been derived. So, for example, NACO has a prescription discount card program that any citizen can use, and there has been some utilization of that, and they have some estimated, I don't know if those are estimated or actual. I do not know how they're calculating those savings, to be honest with you. They talk about our PILT and attendance and those sorts of things. So we thought that information would be of some interest to you. I think we're going to be seeing, just as a general comment, I think we're going to be seeing some of our membership organizations. I believe CCI right now is looking at their fee formula. They haven't come up, I think, with a resolution to that, but they have a few alternatives out there right now, some of which would impact our fees more than others. And I don't know if there's a specific direction those are going. We might hear from Steve on that, but I think we're going to start to see some of these adjustments coming back to us that will come to us in our 2014 budget, but I suspect most of them will be pretty minor, like NACO's is.
Steve?
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up. We're looking at a substantial jump in our CCI membership fees. Some counties are going down. A lot of them are staying about the same. A few counties are under the proposed plan, which isn't finalized yet, but that's the direction they're going, and we are one that will take a pretty big hit. I think El Paso County takes a pretty big hit.
And why is that? And how are they determining that in terms of coming up with
they're
a new
determining it partly on population, partly on assessed valuation.
Well, our population hasn't changed very much, and our assessed valuation has gone down unless they're using a new formula.
I'll have to, I don't want to, I'd have to get out my notes and stuff on that to give a better report, but it's coming down the pike, and I think within part of a year we'll probably be hearing from them more on that.
George, just I've had a quick opportunity to review the spreadsheet. I think Phyllis picked it up at the CCI meeting, and it looks like it's not just whether those factors have gone up and down. There's two things that would affect probably three factors that would affect our fees. One, what's the total cost of operating CCI, so there's really, the formula is about how do you divvy those expenses up. And so I haven't looked at their budget to see if their budget's increasing, but I think everyone's experiencing a little bit of inflationary pressure. So that's probably one factor that'll drive it up. And then how those factors move in relation. So even though our assessed value has gone down, it may not have gone down as much as in other communities. So that would actually cause our portion to potentially go up. And then I think the third factor is I think they're weighting those a little bit differently, so that maybe assessed valuation is counting a little bit higher than population used to in the old formula. But they've got different alternatives out there right now where they're trying to sort these things out, and I really don't know where they've landed, and we still need to analyze that.
Yeah, it seems like an assessed value is not really a fair indicator for what a county's able to, or should contribute in terms of their dues. Perhaps it should be looking at a county budget, because assessed value, I mean, we
It's
don't,
one half of the equation,
I mean,
right?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like it's a windfall for us. I mean, those dollars get distributed throughout all these other special districts, and the county's portion of that is really minuscule in terms of the overall tax collection. So I'm not sure that is a fair way to do it, and to put us to base it on that. Rachel?
Yeah, I didn't go to the June meeting in Vail, so I'm not sure to what level there was a good presentation on these options or not. What I've heard a little through the grapevine is that, it's really being driven by some members on the executive board and looking at their county share and how to change the formula. And these things are always contentious. I'm certainly not advocating one way or another. I would really suggest more that John spend more time with Chip Taylor and understand where is this coming from and what are the options. I have heard from other counties who don't feel very happy either. And I'm not so sure that evaluation or our own county budget would get us very far, because, we're including the airport and we collect the money for RAFTA, and how much is pure county general fund versus open space and library. I think that still would compare very high to a lot of your Eastern Plain counties and things like that. And, it just reminds me very much of trying to find the appropriate funding formula for the formation of the RTA between Glenwood and Aspen, and the mix of population and sales tax and these sort of things, lane miles, and it was horrendous. And it always ends up being a compromise one way or the other. I certainly don't want to see us inordinately put forward. And I had heard just really briefly from Chip when I was in Western Interstate Region in Flagstaff that they're rethinking the whole public lands traveling committee aspect of this as well. And that some counties are saying, well, we could send our own people to these conferences for the same amount of money we put into public lands, and then we have to vote for a representative. And I don't know where that's going to shake out or not, but I think, from my perspective on it, it's really something maybe, administrative staff to administrative staff can get the real skinny on behind this and start to, register objections formally on our behalf if this just really seems unfair, and talk to some of our other counties who may be affected more negatively as well, to say, look, here's a block of people who don't think this new formula is going to work.
So it's not so much the case that CCI is expanding their budget. It's more the case that there's other counties who would like to readjust.
I think there's probably a little bit of all of it, and I think what we'll do is plan on doing an MOI in the future when we have a better handle on those factors. But I did want to make you aware, I think we're going to start to see, and again, this is part of that emerging from the recession. I think we're going to see a lot of organizations going back and looking at fee structures and looking at their budgets in ways they just haven't done for the past 3 years when things have been really tight. I think we're going to start to see that as the economy recovers, and we can expect to see more and more changes across the board. CCI just being one of them. We'll pay attention to that one.
Yeah, well, like NACO is sort of, that's a reasonable increase, so it's cost of living or just adjustments. But for substantial change, I I think that's another conversation we need to follow up on.
Yeah.
Yep.
A lot of the CCI problem was driven because Denver dropped out of CCI. They
That's right.
Denver's a city.
They are a county, but they're putting they're concentrating on CML, their municipal stuff instead of that, and so that put a big crunch financially on CCI, and this is kind of the fallout from that. And I'm remembering that Garfield County's taking a hit on this also because of all the gas drilling, the valuation of that. And Weld County also, because of their oil and gas drilling, all three of us are, for however they're doing the math, are jumping substantially, and CCI does not want to lose any more counties like they lost Denver, and that would be really a disaster to them if they lost. Weld County's membership fees are way, way greater than ours. If they lost Weld County, they'd have to start laying off staff at CCI.
Well, and they may when Weld County forms a new state.
Yeah, right. Rob?
Just to throw another layer on this, with the same discussion regarding Northwest COG, there were a couple of things that were discussed, and I think we do it in September, is where we talk about the dues for the next year. So it's been some time now. But there's kind of a double dipping thing that I argued about with the dues with municipalities and counties, because a lot of the benefits of Northwest COG are based on the citizens, and the dues are based on valuation and population, just like they are with CCI. But someone who wants to take advantage of a weatherization program that's done through Northwest COG, whether you're part of Snowmass Village or part of Pickens County, it really doesn't matter because you're really a citizen of both. So now they just brought Snowmass on board into Northwest COG. Aspen pays a pretty high fee as a municipality goes. So that was one discussion we had. The other discussion we had was caps for counties. So there was a big piece of contention with Eagle County reaching a $50,000 membership with the calculation based on their population and valuation. And the decision among the board was to cap dues at $50,000. So per person and per valuation, they're not paying proportionately what other counties are paying. Those were just two other discussions that took place with Northwest COG and their due assessment.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to the next MOI?
Well, just to clarify on that last one, you are going to talk to CHIP separate from giving us an MOI of what their final conclusions are.
Yeah, we can talk to them. I think we're going to need to understand what their final...
What the backstory is,
Yeah.
and what the other options are.
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be great.
The next MOI is just a reminder that we have two outstanding decisions regarding citizen board appointments. We interviewed Kevin Heineken on May 21st for a position on the Translator Advisory Board. At that time, we thought that we'd have another application coming in based on a phone call, but we have not had any additional applications at this time. So he's still waiting a decision. Then we have Ellen Hunt, who was interviewed on May 28th for a position on the Citizen Grant Review Committee. And let's see, both of the other applicants are youth applicants that would fill a separate seat. And so looking to see if the board has any direction on either of those two applicants and appointments at this time.
For the translator board, Kevin would be filling an alternate position?
I believe so, based on the
Because there's 5 regulars and 2
position,
alternates.
yeah.
Okay, so is the board comfortable with appointing Kevin to the alternate position? See the nod of heads.
Okay.
And then Ellen Hunt was applying for the Citizen Grant Review, and I remember that she said that she would be available this year, but not next year, so I don't know if that's an issue or not.
she's an outstanding citizen in nonprofits. I think she'd have a lot to add.
I believe she'd have a lot to add. I was discouraged by that factor as well. I mean, it'd be preferable in my mind to make a 2-year appointment. On the other hand, we've had a number of people who got a 2-year appointment and then resigned for one reason or another, moving out of town, just couldn't do it anymore, things like that on this board. And given that they're going to need to start meeting in August, we haven't had any other applications, I'd really like to at least take advantage of her expertise for this year.
Okay, other comments? Michael?
Yeah, I think none of us can say we're going to be here in 2 years. Any certainty. So
hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, we can all hope we are. So I'm fine with a 1-year appointment. She was very open and forthcoming with it, so this will be a good year.
Steve?
I got to serve with Ellen Hunt on the Agricultural Advisory Board quite a few years ago, and she contributed a lot to the board. She was always active on that. And based on her, all that she has done for different nonprofits in the valley, I think she would be a good board member and, well aware of the different things that come into play.
Okay.
Okay.
And then we have, coming up, we have 2 interviews for that committee, but they're both youth
They're both,
applicants.
yeah, for the youth seat, and those are July 16th. I
All
believe they're
right,
scheduled.
school's out, so
Yeah.
great.
And that is it for memos of interest.
Okay, let's shoot ahead for future agendas.
Okay. Couple of things on future agendas, really responding to 2 items that Rachel and Rob had brought up last week. So WeCycle, we'll put that on for next Tuesday. We had some vacation schedules and such in there also. And then the board had requested we set up a meeting with the school board and try and get that on a little bit sooner. We've got a tentative meeting set up on August 13th right now, and so we will be confirming that and time and place, the whole 9 yards, but we're working on firming that up. We also are working on some times to bring in our representatives, Melly Hamner and Gail Schwartz, and we don't have dates for those yet.
Rachel?
Yeah. Perhaps I wasn't clear because we were talking about a couple different things at once. And at one part, we were talking about our scheduled meetings with our regional partners. But I guess I was looking for more specifically from the school finance director, where do they think the legislation left them, and how or if we can influence the eventual ballot measure that goes forward. And so August would probably be too late for that.
Okay.
And so I don't know if they're still gathering signatures. I'd heard a number of different, titles were filed so that the petition gatherers would have a lot of different options. So it was more maybe just a memo from Kate, as that's her name, isn't it, Kate?
Yeah,
Yes,
Fuentes,
of what she thinks and what their best assessment is of where this seemed to leave them, and and any next steps. But it doesn't have to be a board-on-board meeting to get that information.
Okay.
Rob?
And I just want to be clear that the EOTC meeting that was moved, right, from this Thursday? Originally, it was scheduled the 20th. Do we have a date that was moved to?
That
I just didn't
one-
change it in my calendar.
That one was canceled in favor of, I believe we have one set up now in August.
22nd is what I wrote down in my
22nd.
book as a potential.
And we're firming that up with all the entities right now, and that will be to come back and begin that governance discussion that we had talked about at our last EOTC meeting.
Okay, August 22nd.
And I'll be out of town for that.
And we still need to confirm that, yeah.
Okay. Other for future agendas? Michael?
I'm not going to be here on the 2nd,
August 2nd,
July 2nd.
July 2nd. Oh, okay.
I have one item that sort of may carry over into open discussion, but I've talked about this in the past. I would like to see the board would consider having a work session on a TDR program. And that would include a discussion of how we appropriate TDRs per acreage, whether it's a CDPUD or something else. There's different variations now to look at some more consistency. And have a sort of a broader discussion just in terms of where the TDR program is to date and how it's evolved, and perhaps how do we ensure that it continues to be effective, or is it still effective? Sort of broader discussion on that, I think. I would like to see if the board is willing to put that on the future agenda.
I support that, that's fine with me.
Yeah, I've seen, being on the receiving end of the TDR program, I can see areas where it could be improved, and some parts have been kind of frustrating about it. So I think it would be worth taking a look at it and see if we can improve the program.
Okay, Rachel?
Yeah, something I didn't catch before, and just for the board, but we do have 2 more citizen grant review interviews coming up on Tuesday, July 16th, and there's only 1 vacancy. And so if...
Well, those are youth. Those are youth.
Oh, those
Both
2
for the
names are the
seat.
youth.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I'm sorry, I just thought there were more adults.
No.
Thank you.
We did have along that same lines, July 9th, we have a tentative schedule for a Healthy Rivers Board interview. I didn't realize there was a spot open on that. Is someone...
Yeah, I believe, I don't have that right
Okay,
in
but
front of
there is
me,
a-
but I believe there is a spot open on that.
That's
I'll
yeah, okay, that's
have
fine.
to go back and look at that, George.
Okay, so that's it for future agendas.
Open discussion, just a couple items for you. We can knock these out and maybe take a longer break until
Yeah.
the 3 o'clock item. But we have brought our fire mitigation coordinator on board as of yesterday. We brought Jerry Peets on board. He is most recently the deputy fire chief in Basalt. He had decided to move on to doing some new things, and he has a real passion for mitigation, and so we conducted interviews and brought him on. He started yesterday. His first steps right now is he'll be coordinating with the fire districts to really identify for lack of a better term, the regions, the hotspot regions that we'll want to focus our coordination efforts on, and then we'll be building an outline and prioritizing 1 or 2 of those areas to start with this, what's really essentially a pilot project this year. So we'll be hearing a lot more from him, but wanted to let you know that that is up and running. Ideally, if we do this in the future, we'll be up and running in March, but this is a good start and a good time to be doing this. The other item that I just wanted to bring to your attention, Jim had been in front of you about a special event that was going to take place in Atlantic's hangar, and it included an expo as well as a dinner fundraiser for the new aeronautics program. There wasn't enough immediate response on the expo portion, so they're going to be canceling the expo portion, but the fundraising and dinner portion is still moving ahead as planned. So just wanted to let you know that the expo will not be happening, and that may be an event that they try and bring back at some point in the future.
Okay.
I think they'd have more luck with it during the school year than once the last
That was,
bell has rung.
That was one of the conclusions that they drew, is their target audience may not really be in town right now. Yeah.
Another thing I think we should get moved from the back burner to the front burner now is the greenhouse committee. And we talked about that for several years, and I know there's been interest, certainly from some citizens down in the Emma area to form and work on the committee. And And I think the timing is right to start to look at that in light of coming up against a timeline when we're going to look at recreational marijuana and the impacts that may have and requests that may come in for greenhouses. So I think the timing is such that we should push ahead on that.
We need to do a work session. I do have some time set up with Cindy and John this week to really explore that, because the greenhouse issue and the grow operation issue can be separated, but I agree with you, George. It's going to raise those issues at the same time, and we need to probably have some direction and understanding of where we want to go.
Okay. Anybody else for open discussion?
Nothing today.
Steve?
Just a reminder that the open house is at the landfill, or resource, what's it called? Resource
Recovery Center, yeah.
Yeah, tomorrow at 11, so that would be an opportunity to, I think, see how the operation is going right now, and, you know, how our new manager there is working out, and get a free lunch out of the deal.
I don't know, lunch at the landfill. What's wrong with that picture?
George, it's better than you think.
It's better than you think.
Roadkill or?
No. I will be at the Northwest COG meeting over in Vail, so I won't be able to attend.
I actually have a Nordic Council meeting at noon, so I can go for a short while to the landfill, but then.
What did you say the name was?
At 11 o'clock.
11 to 2 tomorrow.
To 2, I think.
I think you should have an email.
From a while ago.
Okay, there's nothing else for open discussion. We'll take a break, and at 3 o'clock we'll come back for our last agenda item.
Great.
Loan Fund, and Anita Cameron is here from Northwest COG. She's a business loan officer, and so she's going to explain this program. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here. The loan fund has actually been in existence for 30 years, and it includes and has served 9 counties, including Pitkin, for that period of time. We're in the process of recapitalizing the loan fund with this particular grant application to the state. And we'll recapitalize it with CBDG grant state funds. Eagle has agreed to be the lead county on the application, and the Northwest COG will be the co-applicant. And Northwest COG will also be the administrator. So that provides oversight for my work. In the past, the loan fund was a standalone entity, and it didn't have this level of oversight. So right now I'm the only loan officer, and may be for many years to come, but the Northwest COG that board will be the oversight for my work. And there's also an intermediary layer that is the loan committee. They're an advisory loan committee, so they don't actually approve the loan, but they advise how it would be structured or whether we should do it or not. And then from that level of look at the loan committee, it goes to the state, to DOLA, and they give a final approval. So there's really several layers of oversight to the work before the money is put out. We're asking Pickett County to sign on the application so that we can continue to provide business assistance and business loans in Pickett County. That's essentially what I'm here for. The loans will range from $5,000 to $100,000. We will look and consider loans over $100,000. We do have a couple of requests in right now for larger amounts. So we will consider the merit of those as well. But in general, the loans will be between $5,000 and $100,000. They are typically for equipment, inventory, and working capital. They must create or retain one job per $20,000 loaned. 51% of the jobs would be filled by low to moderate income. Now, those income figures are determined by the county or by the location, so they vary quite widely in the 9 counties that I'm serving. Prospects also must be turned down by a bank. We are not here to compete with banks. We're here to partner with them or to do the things that they find a little too risky. And then hopefully we can get the businesses on their feet and get them back to the banks where they would belong. So in our records that I was able to access since 2010, we did not have any existing paying customers in Pitkin County, but we know that we have had in the past, and we do currently have one applicant from Pitkin County.
So again, the process is if I wanted to get a loan for something for my business, I might first go to my bank or any bank.
Yes.
And if I was not approved for the loan by that bank, then I would have an alternate to go to Northwest COG for this revolving. How does it vary in terms of the interest rates?
The rates would probably be similar to a bank, but we would be able to be a little easier on collateral and longer on the loan term.
And then are you as strict, or perhaps not quite as strict then as a bank in terms of looking at credit or a business plan or
we will look at
history?
We will look at a business plan. We will look at startup companies, which most banks will not. So not as strict there, but we do expect them to do a business plan, have their pro formas, lay out how it is they're going to create these jobs and how they're going to repay the loan. So probably just as strict in that regard.
And then since you're representing 9 counties, what sort of bank do you have in terms of dollars, in terms of budget that you can actually allocate on an annual basis, and how does that money first get generated? Is that a block grant from the state to Northwest COG?
Yes, this block grant that we are applying for will be the initial bank of money to work with. And as soon as we have it placed out in the community according to these guidelines, then we can ask for more. We don't have to come back and ask for you to sign another grant application at that point. It's just the lead county asking for an addendum for more money.
So George, the revolving loan programs are pretty common, and it's pretty also common to capitalize them with these community development block grant dollars. And so what happens when the loan program is working well is that the money is loaned out and then it revolves back into the fund as entities are making payments, and then those dollars can be accumulated and loaned back out. And so the recapitalizing really does 2 things. One, it provides money for cash flow so that you can continue making loans if you've been successful putting money out over a 15 or 20 year period, whatever the terms are. Plus, it allows the total amount that you're able to put into the communities to grow, so that as you look at your receivables or your future payments back in, as well as the recapitalizing, that the amount of money that you can put out into the communities can grow. And so, and the other advantage of the revolving loan fund is that community development block grant dollars come with really specific requirements around them that have to be met. And there's more onerous reporting requirements, both for the you administering it, but also for the businesses. as those dollars revolve back into the loan fund, they'll become more flexible.
Exactly.
They only have to rotate out once to meet those community development block grant requirements. And so it's a way to build a tool for gap lending. And Anita, correct me if I'm wrong, but a typical way that this would be used is if you needed $100,000 to start up your business, you may be able to get traditional financing with a good business plan and such. You may go to a bank and only be approved for $80,000 of that $100,000, and then oftentimes this loan fund would be used to cover the gap between the traditional financing and what is needed to support what is otherwise a good business plan, but somebody needs to be willing to take on a little bit more risk and that sort of thing. So it's typically, you have good a good business plan and such, but you're willing to take on a little bit more risk with these,
Right.
And to be a little bit more flexible in terms of spreading the payments out and such to make it more affordable.
So for Pickens County, what you're asking is for us to sign on to this block grant, and it does not, Pickens County won't incur any costs nor any liability. It's just an opportunity for Pickens County residents to apply for this
That's right.
grant. And as you said, Eagle County will be the fiduciary
Yes,
agent.
yes.
It's more of an administrative function, really, in terms of signing a grant application, because there's no dollars coming to us, no dollars being appropriated out. But they do look for the chief elected official to sign it. And so it's kind of more under your administrative duties, so we thought it was appropriate to bring in a work session and just see if the board was supportive of the county signing on to the grant, and we can do that.
All right, questions? Rachel and Steve?
Yeah, I'm just looking at page 8 of 31 on the handout that we have, and it's the past performance of Northwest Territories. And, it basically says, unless I'm reading it wrong, that there's been 45 defaults out of 85 loans made. And I'm just wondering, how does that track with these sort of programs in the state? And I realize a default may not mean that everything's gone. They may still be trying to catch up or in business. But it really looks like a fairly high failure ratio. And it makes me wonder, have there been new provisions put in place to avoid that sort of high default rate?
Yes. I don't know what the statistics are statewide for that number. I could probably find out and get them back to you, but that's exactly why we are putting 2 new levels of oversight onto the loan fund. Like I said, it used to be a standalone entity, and now the Northwest COG will be the oversight, and I'm housed with them, and they're my employer, so it's a very direct oversight there. And then all the funds have to pass through Eagle County, so they'll be very aware of what we're doing, and I'll be reporting to them as well.
This is new for Northwest COG, and it is exactly, Rachel, I think what you're pointing out is one of the motivating factors for reorganizing how this loan fund is administered and overseen. And so having the county as the fiscal agent, really Eagle County will be the fiscal agent taking in and spending the dollars out, creates a check and balance, and then Northwest COG is coming in to actually provide the administration, so the oversight of the applications, awarding of the loans. And so you have a little bit of separation of duties that didn't exist before that should make this, I think, a lot more transparent. Rob, you've probably been involved in some discussions. I don't know if
There's
I've
been a
missed.
lot of cleanup in the last couple of years, and a lot of that, and the question that I had was, is the $140,000 that's already committed from the revolving fund, is that the money that we've collected from the loans recently? 'Cause I know
Yes, yes.
There was a chunk of loans that were outstanding that had
Right.
been kind of delinquent for a good long time because nobody was overseeing this. And we
nobody
basically just wrote, Northwest Cog's first line of duty was to write some letters and say, you still owe this money. And
Right.
Surprisingly enough, after like 5 years of these people never making a loan payment, we got $140,000.
Right.
They started paying. I mean,
One
you
of
know,
them actually paid off.
Yeah, and that
It
was a big one.
good,
It was like 80
yeah, it was a
grand.
big one.
Yeah.
And so that's what replenished the loan fund enough to hire me, actually. So some portion of that payoff, was committed to my salary. And just so you know, I come from traditional banking, so about 30 years in business banking in the Denver metro area. So I have a very strong background in loaning money to businesses. And
So how much outstanding loans do you have that people are staying current and making their payments on? Is this I'm trying to figure out that we have a leveraged funds proposed and a leveraged funds actual. How much is outstanding? How many loans are outstanding that people are making payments on?
At this point,
Yeah.
we're starting new. So
Yeah.
everything,
Well,
we collected what we could. And so this is a historical thing.
Okay.
So not all that.
Yeah,
those-
that's
That
historical.
number has been rotated through several times.
Okay.
So when it says, $2 million worth of loans, that might have been a loan that
Again
rotated
and
through
again.
a couple
Okay.
of times.
right.
So-
It doesn't show you what's in the rotating
Yeah,
part.
there was a balance sheet of accounts receivable that we went out and we tried to collect. I think it was like $300 and something thousand.
I think so too.
We were able to get 140 back.
Okay.
We actually, just in our last meeting, wrote off the balance of it because we didn't feel it was worth pursuing, like there was a Porsche for the collateral of one. I remember that conversation. We're like, we're not going to go after this Porsche or something like that. So, if the Porsche still exists, this is from 7 years ago. So, this is the big effort to make this more
Okay.
established.
Yeah.
And starting with a $500,000 grant for this, my concern is that it's not really it's not really a self-sustaining number. So hopefully it'll grow. Because
Yes.
when you think of a 6% interest, say, on $500,000, that's $30,000 a year. Well, it's costing $80,000 to administer it.
Yeah, unless we can get a future
Unless we
grants.
can get some future grants to grow it.
Right.
But the benefit of this is, from a subsidy point of view, is that it's a bank that doesn't work on deposits. So it's a bank, it's basically money put into the economy to rotate through to create jobs. Because the thing that you have to show when you apply for this is for every $20,000 you have to
Yes.
create or retain a job. So the idea is that it's a gap loan for creating an economic benefit of the jobs, which will therefore create more spending
Sure.
within the community and those sorts of things. Now, again, from a government standpoint, it's not sustainable at this point, but hopefully we get the $500,000, we submit that, we have some cash flow back into the fund, we submit more money out as we're still collecting a level of interest from the loans that are out there, and we go to get a larger fund to administer even more loans that will cover the overhead on this project. That's the goal of where it should go.
If I can follow up, I understand the concept, and I appreciate you elaborating on it a little more and explain the history as to where we are now. I guess that the other are just kind of comments, they're not questions per se, but I do know from NACO and other organizations, the federal allocation of community development block grants is just really being slashed, and the competition within the states to use that for any number of purposes is pretty broad. And so I think you're really going to be facing a competitive atmosphere this year and even more so next year with the what are we calling it, sequester plus additional cuts that are just really hammering this fund. And it's an incredibly important fund. I mean, counties across the nation are fighting for this because there are a lot of examples of for every dollar spent in a community development block grant, you're able to leverage 5 or 7 times more dollars coming in to the same type of projects. But they can be housing projects, urban redevelopment, a lot of competition. So I think keeping our eye on that and even lobbying on that to make sure those funds continue to flow to the states is an important place to add your voices as a board when those things come up. And then the second comment is just in Pitkin County, and I realize this certainly wouldn't apply to all the counties within your boundaries, but it seems like we already have enough low and moderate income jobs, or many of those, and we need more middle income and higher income jobs for our residents. I mean, our demographics have been showing, particularly as we've looked at them for affordable housing, that we don't have enough affordable housing for people working low and moderate income jobs, and we need jobs that people can move higher up on that income scale. So I don't know that we can change that dynamic or requirement, but I think that should be thought of a little bit in mind when we're looking to what loans should be made in Pitkin County.
Okay.
Steve?
Would Pitkin County have any oversight at all on if there are loans being made to someone in Pitkin County? And would we be notified if someone does have a loan here so we can kind of just track it and see how they're doing?
You're welcome to know about it. I mean, once the loan is made, then it's public information. Up to the point, just to the point of it being funded, I need to keep it confidential. But once it is funded, then it becomes public record. So you're welcome to know how they're performing.
Okay, I was thinking with the default rate, maybe you get the county putting some little energy and advice behind to help people maybe run a little better business plan or whatever could be helpful. Yeah. How do you advertise, or how do customers find out about this?
Well, it's amazing how they have found me right now without any kind of advertising. They just go looking on the internet, I guess. But the first place that I will be putting the word out is with banks, because they get the walk-in customers that they feel bad that they can't help, and then they'll send them my way. And they're very good about understanding the parameters that we have to work with. So that's number one. And then once I feel like I have relationships established with all the bankers in the counties, then I will be out speaking at Chamber of Commerce events, Rotary, places where business people hang out. And because this money can be for expansion of businesses as well. Mm-hmm. So, it's not just the new.
Mm-hmm. Probably have a better success rate of established businesses just doing an expansion because they already have the track record of running the business.
And like John said, sometimes they just almost qualify at the bank, but they need a little bit of gap help, and we can do that too.
So along with our participation, which I mentioned earlier, we won't have any fiscal responsibility or liability. I also don't want to see the county be in a role as a collection agency either.
No.
I'll be the collector.
To build, I think, on Steve's question, Anita, as part of taking the community development block grant dollars, don't you put an advisory committee together for reviewing the loan applications?
Yes, that was that loan committee.
Could you talk a little bit about that, the makeup of that committee?
Okay,
and how that's appointed?
yes.
We're still looking for applicants.
We are. We'd like to have one from each county. We would like to have at least one person with legal background. We'd like to have at least one with bank business lending experience. And then the rest we would like to have be business owners with the actual experience of borrowing money and putting together business plans. So we are asking for people, if you have ideas of people that would be good on this advisory committee. We'll probably meet one time together in, I think Glenwood is the central place to all 9 counties, one time maybe in late August. And then after that it would be a phone call a month probably to advise on the loans that I'm submitting. So I'd submit them to the committee members by email and we'd have a phone call.
Okay. Any other questions? Rachel?
Well, what are your timelines in terms of when would the state let you know if they've approved this grant application and you'd be up and running?
Well, we're planning that it will take a couple months for them to give us that approval. The public hearing for the grant application is next week, June 25th, and that's the date where Eagle County would actually sign off. Our goal was to have all the other counties signed prior to the public hearing date, so then we could submit it right away to the state. And then, like I said, we're planning on 2 months after that.
Okay. And have you been networking at all with, is it Randy Bolton, who's run the business center in through CMC in Basalt and the Valley?
And she's in Glenwood.
She's in Glenwood now?
Yes. And I'm actually going there tonight and going to meet with her tomorrow.
Okay.
We've exchanged a few emails and...
Okay. Does your agency through this help people realize what other things may be available through different agencies such as USDA and their rural improvement programs?
Absolutely.
So you
because I did come out of banking, I'm not familiar with all the government programs, but I'm learning as fast as I can. And we will apply for grants with like USDA as soon as possible as well, as soon as we get this one behind us.
Yeah, I think the woman's name is Patty Seidel, who has been the regional director on the Northwest. I had known her through the Club 20 meetings, and I think she'd be a good guest speaker to bring to one of your board meetings, because it's not so much that they make loans to agencies like yours, but that they make loans available to individuals as well for rural development, economic development. And so I think that trying to bring the synergy of all these potential programs together, it's Trudy Carouse who's the state director, I believe, but I could be wrong about that with USDA.
Patty's in Delta, isn't she? I think.
Yeah, but she travels quite a bit.
Yeah, she covers this region.
And if it's not the right region, I'm sure she could match you with the right person. But
Okay.
I know they come frequently to talk about these loan opportunities or grant programs or things through USDA regularly to Club 20. And the more we can get all the information in the same pot for economic development, the better.
Okay, and I have been in touch with someone in Craig with the USDA about an application process. And there's also CHAFA that has money to lend support. They'll put cash collateral in banks to, again, fill a gap if the collateral's a little short or something, so we can work with them.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so we have a nod of heads to sign on to the program. Good, well, thank you very much for coming up, Anita.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.
And George, we'll probably catch you after the meeting just
Okay.
Sign them.
while Anita's.
Okay, so with that, we're done for the day unless someone missed anything in open discussion.
Nope.
Nope? Good, so we will adjourn for the day. Thank you, Grassroots.
Thank you.